Okay, we are live. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the August 17th, 2024 edition of the Saturday Free School. We're back in person at the Church of the Crucifixion after a very short hiatus online. And today we're going to keep talking about our recent celebration of James Baldwin's 100th birthday, which was 2 weeks ago now, and continue just like reviewing that and also discuss where we go from here as free school. And then following that, we're going to talk about an upcoming online discussion that's going to be live streams that the free school is hosting, kind of in time with the Democratic Party's National Convention in Chicago, which is on August 21st and 22nd in the afternoon on both days. So we're going to talk about that, which is this week, and then following, the last thing we'll talk about is the crisis in Bangladesh, the coup against Sheikh Hasina, the daughter of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and its impact on South Asia as a whole. But to start with the Baldwin celebration, I'll turn it over to Doc.
Okay, thanks a lot. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try to organize this within 4 parts. First, the celebration itself, an assessment of it. Second, the free school, kind of the beginnings of an autobiography of the free school. Third, the free school's relationship to the people or the people themselves. And fourth, where do we go now for the next 6 months, taking everything into account. First of all, the celebration was a smashing success. I want to explain that as we go forward, how I measure success. First, one could say it was a success given the responses of the people, suggesting that they learned, that they were changed, that this was the Baldwin they wanted to know about and connect with. This is different from all of the other celebrations, at least those that I am aware of online. To put it mildly, they were very boring and very old. There was nothing new. There was nothing intellectually new or stimulating. I speculate, and of course this is mere speculation. I do not have a lot of empirical evidence or even an ethnographic survey, but it appears to me that an ideological and philosophical dynamic was initiated. A dynamic, and this is very important for free school, and it's why we exist. A dynamic which can change the ideological and political landscape, and thereby the capacity of the people to take history in their own hands. And thirdly, I think we were very successful in presenting an alternative to the tired and worn out establishment narrative about James Baldwin, which literally dismisses and disappears him from any serious intellectual investigation. Certainly, Baldwin becomes a tool for those academics that are seeking tenure and promotion, and graduate students that want to write a PhD on something, usually having to do with Baldwin as a queer author consumed by trauma. Here I would like to emphasize 2 words, trauma and queer. By the way, I'm using the word queer in its specific intellectual academic usage, which is a postmodern kind of identity. Well, let me just say, having to do more with bourgeois freedom than with the revolutionary emancipation of the people. This narrative, which was articulated in an essay, I think in the New York Times, there's so many I can't remember all of them, where this queer, traumatized Black man who could not fully be himself because of existing homophobia is finally seeing the light of day, and thus we, quote, we, the queer intelligentsia, will allow Baldwin to at last be himself. You know, when I say this, you'll know. At this point, I feel like falling on the floor in laughter. It's so stupid and frivolous. For bourgeois writers, whose greatest achievement, as far as they're concerned, is to be published in the New York Times, and for other careerists, the we, using postmodernist, feminist, and queer theories, seek to complete Baldwin. This is a grotesque project. It is not Baldwin. And sometimes when you read these essays, you wonder, have you really ever read Baldwin and what he has said about his work? I think we made some headway in dislodging that narrative and presenting a fundamental challenge to it. This did not go unnoticed because of the ubiquity of social media, and therefore they knew as much about us as we knew about them. Because thanks to Jeremiah and others, they would not let Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else rest without something from the Saturday Free School. You blanketed them. So they knew about us like we knew about them. We knew about what was going on at the Schomburg. We knew what was going on at the public library, New York Public Library. We knew what was going on in other places, and it seemed like a lot of it was just thrown together at the last minute. Right. Yeah. You know, very haphazard, very just tired, worn out stuff that is not even worthy of an undergraduate student at a third-rate university. Some of it seemed to be an imitation of what we were doing in terms of a concert in Brooklyn and some other things. I can't recall it all, but some of it seemed so much of a weak imitation of what we were doing, and like they were just throwing it together as a form of virtue signaling. Oh, look, we queers, we white people, we bourgeois, careerist Black people, we're serious. And to take on Baldwin is how would you say, would suggest that you are serious. But the opposite was the case. They were not serious about Baldwin. And this became more apparent as we prepared for this 3-day celebration. We established the opposite of their narrative. And here narrative is very important. And I will use the language of Jeremiah because the universities and the bourgeois intelligentsia and the places that celebrate them seek, after all, narrative hegemony, which is another form of ideological hegemony. And to wipe everything out or to trivialize anything that would challenge the hegemony of the ruling elite. I think we punctured that desire on their part. Because in spite of the fact that none of them took Baldwin seriously, now if you all know something that I don't know, if the fact that they did not take him seriously was exposed by what we have done. And of course, we're not finished. We in effect said that Baldwin is a revolutionary, that Baldwin sets the standard for modern revolutionary love, and that Baldwin, in the end, was a defender of the Third American Revolution. We successfully freed Baldwin from liberal dogma, not to mention that the left as such ignored the whole thing. Baldwin doesn't exist as any meaningful anything for them, which says something very profound about them. How can you claim anything having to do with revolutionary change and ignore Baldwin? The other thing is that our effort to establish a chronology appropriate to Baldwin was successful, I think. Because if you go to any of these other celebrations, I mean, of powerful institutions, it blows my mind. Y'all got all the money in the world, and we were begging for nickel and dimes, and I like to have it that way. I'd rather be a beggar with integrity than a dilettante with all the money in the world. So you take the Smithsonian, I mean, you know, how much money they have is, you just can never begin to count it. You know, just to work for them, you know, you start at 6 figures and just keep it moving, you know? That's how, you know, they have that kind of that cash flow. You know? The National African American Museum in Washington, D.C., you know, all the money you need. And this is the best y'all could do? I mean, really, this is what is blowing my mind. Or the Schoenberg collection, the library that Baldwin went to, growing up and reading every book in that library that he could find. What they did, I mean, is that all y'all got? I was really amazed. But I have to say, you know, that they all concentrate a lot on exhibits. Oh, we have a rare first edition of Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain, signed by him. That's a beautiful thing, you know, but let's keep it 100. Is that all? Is that all y'all got to bring to the people? I mean, excuse me.
Keep going.
And they all concentrated, if you remember, upon exhibits. And maybe like the Smithsonian dedicated their thing to James Baldwin and quote unquote queer resistance. Now, what is that? What is queer? I mean, do the queers have anything to resist? I mean, for real, let's keep it 100. I mean, they have money, they have position, they're part of the ruling class. So So, but anyway, you get the point. I think we were successful in freeing Baldwin from this dogma. It is what ordinary people wanted to hear and to know. I can tell you, if we had gone the route, let us say, of the Smithsonian and centralized Baldwin as a queer Black man, traumatized because he couldn't be himself, and we're going to help him be himself now. I forgot what I was trying to say. I'm trying to keep a straight face in the face of absurdity and foolishness, parading as though they know what they're talking about. And that's what came across, that these academics do not know that much. And it's what we have known about these universities. They are not centers of great learning. They're centers of performance and propaganda and perpetration of a fraud. And they showed it. They had nothing that they would say about Baldwin. In fact, I kind of picked up of Baldwin. There's something unsettling about Baldwin. You know what I'm saying? Something that frightens them about Baldwin. And then again, I concluded that they don't even know his novels. His character development, narrative. They have no sense of the philosophical and ideological genealogy. They don't even know what he knew. For example, I seldom have seen any reference to Baldwin's engagement with Dostoevsky, the Russian novelist, or Victor Hugo. Obviously, Baldwin, in being character, had studied great works of fiction with these strong characters in them. Dostoevsky, I mean, come on. The brothers Karamazov. That is a study in character development. They don't, so I asked myself, I said, well, you a tenured professor somewhere, making big bucks, and you don't know no more. Then there was, sadly, Dwight and I, we went to Lincoln and tried to get them early on to do something. Lincoln University, where I and Dwight had graduated from, and he talked to the president, and the president told us to, work with this professor of English and yada yada yada. And it turned out that, as they put it, they didn't have no time. Right. And I told Dwight, and no one said, you all know who I am. I said, if they ain't got no time for Baldwin, I ain't got no time for them. And this is where I graduated from. But the free school took upon itself, with no money. Often money is an obstacle. In this society, we pay too much attention. Before you do anything in the bourgeois sense, you got to say, well, where are we going to get the funding from? Right. What foundation are we going to go to on our knees, begging for nickels and dimes? That's the way they do things. And we can't say certain things because we can't get no money if we do it that way. For example, it was very dramatic and striking at the exhibit, where in the second case, there was a picture of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That could dissettle people or unsettle people. And if you were talking about funding and getting big bucks, because you'd have to pay us, and each of us would get ours off the top since we're the organizer, and then the rest would go to publicity. And if we got anything left over, we can distribute it among the masses. But the thing is, if you were interested in the approval of the elite, you would not have the Honorable Elijah Muhammad there, in spite of the fact that in the second essay, in The Fire Next Time, Baldwin talks about this meeting and this dinner at the home of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But for the Smithsonian, the great Smithsonian, and if you've ever been down to Washington, it's not one building, it's many buildings. I mean, it's money going mad, where they pay each other more than they pay attention to the people. But the Smithsonian reverses the script, but it's only with a chronology like the one that we have struggled to develop that it makes all the sense in the world that Baldwin met with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, met with Martin Luther King, met with Medgar Evers, met with Malcolm X. Why would he meet with all? Because he is a part of the Black freedom movement. But then you have to separate Baldwin as the living, thinking, world-changing personality into a isolated, separate from his people, traumatized Black man who could never be himself. And we, the queers of today, which means the anti-revolutionaries of this moment, wish to rewrite who he was. You ever talk about historical revisionism, where at the end of the day, when they finish chopping a person up, he wouldn't even recognize himself. In some some terrorists, when they want to send a message to the people that they're terrorizing, they don't just kill you, they're going to chop you up, you know what I'm saying? And all that kind of thing. I look at these academics with all of their soft words and all that. I see them as intellectual terrorists. And you ain't gonna just kill him, man. Now you're gonna chop him up and leave his head in one place and all that. So don't nobody never try in life to be James Baldwin. You understand? It's what Baldwin called the price of the ticket, the price of being honest, the price of being a revolutionary. That every anti-revolutionary and every anti-revolutionary movement going forward must attack him and kill him, murder him again and again and again, because he must not live. And there's a reason for that. And we wanted a Baldwin who lives, and he did live. He is living in this year of Baldwin, and the people recognized it. But that raises the question that many people were asking in these 3 days. Well, who is the free school? Doc? They would ask me, well, Tony, well, what is this? I mean, what you've been doing that you got all these young people and all these people from China and Korea, and why they all, I mean, what is this? And so I think about it all the time. I've been thinking about this even before they were asking me, because I've been trying to figure out, well, what is the free school? Because this is not the free school, as they say, of your grandmother. This is not the original free school of 13 years ago. And it's not the free school basically of 5 years ago. And I think Samir and Sarah will kind of confirm this. And Derek will confirm. this is not. So I had to get my head around, what is this? And I've been working on this for the last 5 years, frankly. Certainly, I really think you all don't know. It keeps me up at night when I'm not looking at YouTube or podcasts, mainly of past free school discussions. But I think the makings of this free school begins with the China conference. And I did not realize at the time what type of undertaking this would be. Michelle and Emily came to my house. How you doing, man? It's good to see you. How you been? And I was a bit naive about China and Chinese. I frankly did not know that Michelle was from Taiwan and that Emily's parents are from the People's Republic. I didn't know that Emily's grandfather is a member in good standing of the Communist Party of China, nor did I know that her parents left China because of the Cultural Revolution and still harbor a kind of, I won't say bitterness, but distaste for the Cultural Revolution and how it robbed them of their youth. I didn't know any of this, but I knew that 2021 was the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China. And I knew that the Free School had did a year of W.E.B. Du Bois and a year of Gandhi. And why not and we had celebrated in 2017 Baldwin, a 3-day symposium. Why not a celebration of this great event, given the upward trajectory of the People's Republic of China, its history, its revolutionary history, the Long March, and all of that. So I just suggested it to them. And I must say, I was very naive. I mean, how did I think they could do it? How did I think they would do it? So and I said to them, I said, do you think we could celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party? Now, I think this was 6 or 7 months out because the celebration is in July. And they said, And so the first question I asked them, I asked it to Emily. I said, Emily, you're not afraid, are you? She said, no. Just so you know how. She said, no, I'm not afraid. I said, because, we can do this and yada, yada, yada. But, I think that was the beginning of a change. It was one thing to celebrate Du Bois, it was to celebrate Gandhi. But the Chinese Communist Party, the Communist Party of China, I should say, to look at its history, to look at the 3 political stages in its modern history, and to do that at an Episcopal church. And we received, interestingly, the go-ahead from the Church of the Advocate. And the only thing they asked of us is that we have someone from the church who would welcome all of the people who assembled, and that in all of our publicity that we include the free school and the Episcopal Church of the Advocate. As you can imagine, it blew my mind. Y'all gonna go along with this? I have to say, and this there was a hasty retreat from that position, and that's why we ain't there right now, I think. But anyway, but that was the beginning of a change. And I think it established, if it hadn't been established previously, that we were serious, very serious group of people, that celebration of the Communist Party of China was a celebration of the revolutionary trajectory of the modern world. It was a celebration of Du Bois. It was a celebration of Robeson. It was a celebration of the revolutionary elements of the Black liberation struggle. By the way, the Nation of Islam as well. Back in the days, I cannot even begin to imagine a Black person who had any moral integrity, who did not embrace the Chinese Revolution, you know, in spite of all of the anti-communist propaganda, etc. But to answer these questions requires an autobiography of the free school, which I'm going to try to do now. But I think we should put it in our heads that to really understand who we are and what we are doing and what we are capable of requires an autobiography. And in this sense, the autobiography in the Baldwinian sense of the autobiography of a people. But as you know, I'm always having conversations with members of the free school. That seems to be another thing that keeps right. And I have these, really unbelievable conversations, and I like conversation. You know, good conversation is better than good wine or whiskey. You know, bourbon. And I was talking to Kathy, and I said to her, because she was asking me or saying, you know, she's figuring a life. And by that I mean, where is her life going? By the way, that's not only Kathy. I'm going to talk about Eddie in a minute.
Bring it out.
I'm about to expose everybody today. Everybody that had a conversation with me that y'all thought was private, I'm going to bring it out in the open now. Hey, you too, sir.
You can. I never hide it.
But I don't think I have time to go through everybody that I talked to. But in talking to Kathy and the question that she was posing, you know, where's my life going? I've made certain decisions about who I am, but how will this decide what I am going forward? And of course, you know, my mind went almost immediately to Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
When he quotes St. Augustine, man is made for God and will not find peace until he finds him. And I said to Kathy, Kathy, whether you knew it or not, even in your childhood, You were striving for this. You know, I had to ask myself, why does the free school fit the people in the free school so well? You know, usually in organizations, and it's been the case in the free school at different times, you know, we all got along, but we didn't really get along as well as we do today in the free school. You know, we did not in the past share our lives the way we do now. Sometimes the sharing is so intimate that we operate like a well-oiled machine. It's not a lot of talk that has to be done. We can easily arrive at a consensus about almost anything, and then the work begins and it gets done. Sometimes I'm amazed at how it gets done, and I don't know how it gets done because I'm not involved in everything, although a lot of people try to say, oh, Doc, that's you, you didn't know how. Well, anyway, I'll come back to that. And I said to Kathy, you were made for this, and you would not find peace until you realized it. I thought about Eddie. And a lot of people say to me, oh, I'm concerned about Eddie. I said, why?
He's crazy.
Well, I think they tried to say because he's not like he was when he was at Cornell. And he's not. And I said, no, Eddie is making deep decisions about his life. And Eddie is a man, and I don't, you know, we don't hang out like that. I mean, Eddie is a man almost constantly in deep thought and meditation because his life is not going to be what it was. And how does he explain to his mother and father? Yes, I'm Mexican American. Yes, that's a given. But the path forward for myself and the Mexican American community is through the Black struggle. And his problem is not his choice of ideas and the direction of his life, but how does he explain this? And frankly, I would say it's going to be difficult. They're not going to be able to understand you. The same with Emily. Emily is always saying, oh, my parents didn't prepare me to live in this world. To which, you know, I always say to her, well, who prepared them?
Right.
They're immigrants from China. They didn't know what they were getting into and still don't really know. And so Emily, who more easily can talk to her parents, it seems, and when she tells me about their conversations, they're trying to figure out her. And why are you the way you are, and why do you believe in what you believe in? And don't you think it's a little bit dangerous for you to have these views? The same with Serafina.
Jesus.
They will not understand. And especially if they dig in their heels and try to argue that what you believe in isn't right. That you're following, I guess when they talk about me, a snake oil salesman. I'm portrayed in many not flattering ways. Purba always says to me that no way she can even begin to talk to her parents about this, that whenever her father sees something in the newspapers in India about things going on, he calls her and says, be careful. I'll never forget when Alice's father, his greatest dream is for his daughter to become a doctor. and to go to Cuba for medical school. And I remember saying, although I don't think I had the authority to say it, to override her father, I said, "You're not going there." You know, her father, when Alice told him that she wasn't going to Cuba, he immediately lost 30 pounds.
15.
But he's never looked better in his life. And he's trying to keep that weight off because he's like a suave dude.
Oh, boy.
But throughout, and Samir, of course, who's gone through many iterations that have shocked and thrown his parents into every kind of conniption. They, especially after the 2016 election, where he was down there in Washington with a bunch of anarchists and got arrested. And his mother, they're immigrants too. I know immigrants. My father was an immigrant. They come to America not to change America, but to get some change. It's all about prevention. One thing, any immigrant you meet, they love money. I'm here to get paid, not to do nothing else. And why don't you see it like I see it? This is America, the land of opportunity, the land. And I always say, based upon my own experience with my father, because he used to get on my damn nerves. That bullshit. This is a capitalist country. You got to fit into capitalism. And here I am a member of the Communist Party. An open member running for office. And my father was so afraid more for himself than for me. See, my father. Immigrant narrative is a very complicated one. It ain't one thing. My father, when he had the choice to fight in World War II, refused. And so once you refuse, you can never be a citizen. You know what I'm saying? So my father had to stay on the low. He couldn't rock the boat. And so his pro-capitalism, pro-money thing was a form of adaptation. So here I am, a communist, and so down on the waterfront where my father worked, he'd have to go to, well, my son is running for office on a third party. I was a third party candidate. But anyway, but they're very concerned, your parents are very concerned, and they have no way of understanding you or this country. And to expect more from them than they're capable of is unfair. So the free school has become, for Philadelphia and maybe for this country, a different type of organization. We think, and I think we might be right, and time will tell, that we are a type of organization and the type of movement for the 21st century. We better fit the spiritual, intellectual aspirations and needs of the masses of working people and poor people than anything out here. And I think a big part of it is our firm rejection of postmodernism and academic discourse. We have utter contempt, at least I can't speak for all of you, for academics and university professors. we more or less, I should say, I see them as dilettantes and frauds who are always telling you, I'm Dr. So-and-so. I mean, to which I like to answer, well, dog, you're not applying for a job with me, so I don't need to know your background or your credentials. They can't open them up. Well, I'm refer to me as Dr. So-and-so. But see, I have a bad attitude anyway, as you all know, to which I said, well, the conversation is over. If this is about credentials, we ain't gonna never get to talking about nothing. But we are that type of organization that is completely and selflessly committed to the truth and to ideological clarity. We fulfill Fidel Castro's standard of revolutionary behavior. And I got this from the speech that Jeremiah shared on Facebook, I guess other places. But I always knew this about Fidel. He had always said this, that the job of a revolutionary is to fight for ideological clarity. If you're not doing that, you can march as much as you want, you can perform and wear what you consider revolutionary garb, spout a lot of rhetoric and all of that. But if you do not share and help to develop among ordinary people ideological clarity, and I'm not talking about whether or not you agree with the first chapter of Das Kapital by Karl Marx. I'm talking about clarity about the history of this country, the proper and correct chronology, the understanding of who are revolutionaries and what is a revolutionary. Most quote unquote Marxist Leninists look everywhere else but here. And even when they look here, they somehow cannot recognize any Black person as a revolutionary, even though in the last year or so, several leftist organizations, belatedly, of course, by the way, the year of W.E.B. Du Bois was 8 years ago now, wasn't it? No, 6 years ago. So some have belatedly discovered Du Bois. Even they are not talking about Du Bois. They're talking about a watered down one sentence that they can pick from Du Bois, not the full thinker who is the equivalent of the great scientific thinkers of the modern epoch. Freedom is the recognition of necessity. Now, here we're talking about, and this is what Hegel was talking about, philosophical and epistemological freedom. It's another way of saying to know the world is to free you from history, or from a determinative history. We can come back to that. The free school as it currently is, every member of the free school was made for this. And you all have been seeking this longer than you even know. I think if you all study your childhoods,
Yes.
Amen.
which is maybe an inconvenient project, but
Amen.
even in childhood, you were unhappy with what was being said about what you should be. You wanted more. And everybody is not like you. Let's keep it 100. But that's okay. There are people who can better adapt. People whom compromise is not difficult. There are people for whom morality does not carry the weight that it does for us. But everybody is different. But you all were made for this. You all have been seeking and still seek completeness, fulfillment, and happiness, not only for yourselves, but for the world. This is what makes the free school different. You all see it. I don't think you did the way I saw it. Knowing Philadelphia, knowing Black Philadelphia, and during these 3 days, there are people who love you. And hold it, wait a minute, Derek, who love you, and you don't even know them. And they love you because they trust you. It's kind of the way a love affair begins, by an initial attraction. When people are attracted, ordinary people, attracted to what they see as good and sincere. And frankly, Black working people like to see serious young people who have a purpose. I can tell you very honestly, one of the things I think they like about free school in Europe is that you're not stuck on hip hop and rap. You're not playing Beyonce and Megan Thee Stallion and all that. You know what I'm saying? Y'all listening to Thelonious Monk and Marvin Gaye and Donny Hathaway and Aretha Franklin. And you know, for a lot of, you know, older Black people, it's, how do they know about that? You know, and why do they like, and that's, you know, like if you see, I say from a man point of view, you see what you consider an attractive woman. You know, it's going, you know, you're going to say, well, damn, you know, I like to get to know you, or something like that. If you know how to approach a woman, most of us don't, of course. But I speak for myself. Maybe y'all got it worked out. So, you know, that initial attraction, which if you get to know a person, can develop beyond a romantic love and attraction to becoming something very serious that is anchored not in a physical attraction, not only in a physical attraction, but something deeper, something spiritual, something rooted in love, real love and trust. I don't seek to be hyperbolic, nor am I attempting to make something more of our relationship with the people at this point that does not exist. But I honestly saw something developing. It struck me most at the central branch of the Free Library. I think I had a chance to hear people, to talk to people more there than I did in the other 2 days, although they were very moving. And I think I saw the same thing there, but especially at the central branch of the Free Library. And the expressions of joy that this was done, the clarity and confidence of, you know, Blaze and Nuri and Kathy in their presentation, the large crowd of people viewing an exhibit. And then wondering, well, who are these people? They don't act like most young people, their ages. But we can trust them. And believe me, that's what I was feeling. Of course, my friend Jasmine and her husband Sid. I mean, she called him Dr. Tony. Dr. Tony, I don't know, but I think she was the one that said the free school represents the form of solidarity and organization for Black people at this time. But I thought it was in the Afro-Asiatic Peace Council. Now let's step back. We were in prison in postmodernist dogma. First of all, African Asia is backward to them. The Muslim world is backward because it does not embrace queer and feminist theorizing. China, for the same reason, all of the Afro-Asiatic world is a backward culturally and philosophically for them. For us, it is not. It is the future. So I can't even imagine what all of the quote leftists, who by the way, most of them boycotted all of the Baldwin stuff. And I kind of store all of this in my memory. So when I run into them, I think they're avoiding me these days because, I have a dirty mouth, I curse, and I have a nasty attitude, and I don't like perpetrators of frauds.
Right.
I really don't.
Right.
In a serious time like this. So they boycott Baldwin. Baldwin is not important. They ain't going to do nothing, and the people that are doing it, they don't want to be successful. I often ask the question, then, Paul Robeson's question, what side are you on?
Right.
Are you on the side of history, or are you on the side of the existing establishment? They avoided it. They did not come to it. But time waits for no people. The movement of history, the movement of people has now reached a critical point. This is not a matter of just the American people. This is a matter of world humanity.
Right.
And either you're on the right side of history or you're not. To be on the wrong side of history is to be a counter-revolutionary. All of the postmodernist theories, in the end, turn out to be counter-revolutionary. This verdict on the majority of the American intelligentsia is a harsh one, but it must be made. I find myself to be very impatient with this crop of so-called progressive socialist communists. They cannot see the future, or they only see it in rhetorical ways. The future for them is kind of the way things are right now with a few changes. Future for some, but not for some, for a whole gang of people, especially the Black leadership class. Again, a group of people that I have utter contempt for, and I don't. The future is Kamala Harris. To which I like to say, I would use some other words in between there, but this is church. Give me a break. Kamala Harris, the future? Genocide? The future? This? But they want to sell that to the people. again, for the Judas of the world, it's mainly making some changes on the arrangement of chairs on the Titanic, which is sinking. Whether you're going to go down first or go down in between or go down last, you're going to go down if you tie yourself to this failing project. And then, of course, it's very apparent that Netanyahu and the Israeli Nazi regime has exposed Western civilization as it currently exists.
Yeah.
This is not just Israel. If Netanyahu is a genocidist, so is Biden, so is Harris, so is the French and British governments. So what, if there's anything positive to take from this whole situation, it is that the Israeli regime has exposed Western civilization. Humanity will never look to it for anything. And here Baldwin is so important. And here a different chronology, a different ordering of historical and social facts to explain the American people is so very, very important. You can't do Baldwin. You can't do the future if the chronology is wrong, or if you don't even know how to think about it. Let me just end on this. Where do we go from here? Clearly, the foundation of this past weekend, we established Baldwin as a revolutionary and a man of morality and a man of love. And in this sense, the two things, the Black proletarian imaginary and the revolutionary moral imperative, the two foundations that we organized our understanding of Baldwin. I try to ask myself, why don't none of y'all, all y'all smart professors of that and other, this, that, and other, you don't see this? I can't figure, because, okay, let me stop. So we must continue. I've suggested to Kathy and I think maybe Blaze that the exhibit, we have to organize tours of small and large groups of students, of community people. My 12, by the way, from Zion, of trips to the exhibit. We might wish to link these excursions, these trips, and when the school's open, of course, we might want to link this to the showing of the documentary. But definitely a visit to the exhibit. Very important. And, you all, the way you all explain that, I mean, I don't know, I know I was standing next to Blaze's mother, and she said, I'm Blaze's mother. I said, your son ain't no joke. Just like that. And we didn't have a long chance to rap much beyond that. But it was no joke. Everybody was impressed. Everybody learned something. And everybody that had heard the name of Baldwin said, now I know something about Baldwin that is fundamental. And let me tell you, you don't know what it means to Black people to see something so truthful. And when you put a picture of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in there, see, there's so many ways to avoid truth and the truth about Black people. See, and the pressure is only certain Black people can be shown in the free library. You know what I'm saying? So this is the way, you know, the ruling class establishes narrative hegemony or ideological hegemony. You can show this black person, but you can't show that. You know what I'm saying? This black person is acceptable to the ruling class, and I would say at this point, to the Zionist establishment of the Zane. And definitely, even though Elijah Muhammad and Baldwin met, you can't show him. You know what I'm saying? Nor can you show anything that suggests unity based upon the principle of freedom. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad met with Martin Luther King. You can't talk about that? Why not? You know, because there are forces outside of black people who want to determine the direction, the trajectory of the black movement and what black people do. And that's why most ordinary black people have utter contempt for the black political class. Because most black people feel, and they are right about this, that they do not act independently. They are acting on an agenda that is not decided by black people. And you know, we'll talk about this more. But we saw it with Cori Bush in Missouri and Jamal Bowman in New York. They spoke out against the genocide in Gaza, and the Zionists went after them with millions and millions of dollars and defeated them. But yet the black political class, well, let's just keep it moving. We want to elect Kamala Harris. And see, the price of that ticket is too high. You know, that kind of moral unprincipledness, that kind of bootleg coonism. And everybody knows that the black political class are made up of coons and Uncle Toms that are only worthy of, you know, stereotypical portrayals of the 19th and early 20th century. I won't go and talk about that, but I think you got my point. These are not, it's just like, how can I call? Oh, I don't know. Okay, so we have to do all that we can to make the documentary available. That is our answer to the BS. We have to, I would say, even see if we could have the exhibit extended, especially as school comes back, as Lotus starts meeting at Penn and South Philly. And hopefully, I think, Jerry, I have a way that we can get the thing going at West Philly High School. But it's going to take a little bit of discussion. And I think the model at South Philly could work for us. You ain't gonna have everybody, because most young people don't trust the school, they don't trust the teachers, they don't trust what is called learning. So they're not interested because it's all a fraud. But 3, 4 young people, start there and see where it goes. But definitely, we have to see if it can be extended so university students, high school students, and as more people learn about it, will be interested in visiting the exhibit. And, you know, perhaps we can work with the Department of Philosophy, Religion, and Education, because I know there are people who come through the library who visit the exhibit, but we have to ask maybe that we do joint tours, and that somehow we announce that on this day at this time, there will be a guided tour of the exhibit, because it does take some explanation, you know. The last thing, that we even deepen our understanding of Baldwin, and this I get from an essay by Du Bois called Jefferson Davis as a representative of civilization. You can pull it up on the internet. But I think we must also, as we deepen this understanding of Baldwin as a representative of civilization, of course, the opposite of what Jefferson Davis is. We have to be a little, we have to work on how we frame it. I think a representative of a civilization of the future, representative of a civilization of peace, a representative of civilization as it is becoming. And then tie that into his notion of achieving our country and of the last white nation. But I think as our narrative goes forward, as we, show and talk about the documentary, as we lead tours, guided tours of the exhibit, that we talk about him as a representative of civilization. And I would suggest that you read this essay online. And I was going to read. Can I just say something?
Yeah,
Let me just quote. This is from the second paragraph. This is Du Bois's valedictory speech in his undergraduate graduation at Harvard. And then he says, I wish to consider not the man, but the type of civilization which his life represented. He's talking about Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis was a leader of the Confederacy of the pro-slavery people. Its foundation is the idea of the strong man, individualism coupled with the rule of might. And it is this idea that has made the logic of even modern history, the cool logic of the club of the elite. It made naturally brave and generous man Jefferson Davis, now advancing civilization by murdering Indians, now hero of a national disgrace called by courtesy the Mexican War, and finally, as the crowning absurdity, the peculiar champion of a people fighting to be free, so about the South, in order that another people should not be free. That kind of framing, although we're talking about substantively something different, it is as a representative of civilization that Baldwin becomes the Hegelian man of destiny. And all else is farce. And that's what we saw in these celebrations. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think, well, I wanted to comment on the autobiography part, because you called that. But I guess
I could have called you out too.
I know. Yeah. Well,
I didn't want to expose you today.
well, I think it's an interesting question because, yeah, I guess even for myself, I frame it. I think the way framing it as like an attraction, I think it makes sense to me. But I guess also because of my very Christian upbringing, the way that I understand my participation in free school is, you could say, through the metaphor of two roads in the Bible, one of which is the road to Jericho, which is the road to Emmaus. The roads in which the latter is lesser known, but it's a story that takes place, I think, after Christ is resurrected, and these two kind of disciples are walking on a road, and they encounter a stranger, and they're talking about Christ and all this stuff, and then they reach out. I think they reach out, and the stranger leaves, and then they only realize afterwards that was Jesus. And then the other metaphor of like the road to Jericho is, I think, also from Kings, portrayal or his kind of narration of that parable, I guess, in which yeah, you have like the famous story of the Good Samaritan and all that, and I guess the reason why I bring those up is because for like let's say for me, for someone like Alice and Eddie, for instance, we graduated from Cornell, and then we spent like years living in New York City, and we're just like, I think, very overwhelmed by life and just trying to figure out our lives in the way that most of us just are trying to figure out our lives. But we had the opportunity together with Doe and a few others to read King's book of sermons, Strength to Love. And so he has one of them is called On Being a Good Neighbor. But I think for me, a lot of what has kind of, I guess, what can help to explain this question of like, why are these people in free school so, in some ways, almost like possessed? It's like we're possessed by something. Like, why are we so driven? Like, why, for instance, for myself, like, why do I have to learn how to do sound engineering in order to, with a background as an English major, in order to, do the, like, do crazy at a peace concert, all that stuff. And yeah, part of it is like this, like in the sermon on being a good neighbor, King, he asks this question of, I guess I'll read it, but he says, so this is King, he says, we so often ask, what will happen to my job, my prestige, or my status if I stand on this issue? Will my home be bombed? Will my life be threatened? Will I be jailed? And he continues and says, he talks about the Negro professional in the context of the civil rights movement and says, the Negro professional does not ask, quote, what will happen to my secure position, my middle class status, or my personal safety if I participate in the movement to end the system of segregation, but instead asks, what will happen to the cause of justice in the masses of Negro people who have never experienced the warmth of economic security if I do not participate actively and courageously in the movement? The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. The true neighbor will risk his position, his prestige, and even his life for the welfare of others. In dangerous valleys and hazardous pathways, he will lift some bruised and beaten brother to a higher and more noble life. And I think at least for me specifically, that was a really, like, I feel like there's been accumulation of different encounters, different decisions, different conversations, different relationships that have led each of us to where we are. But part of it is like, for me, it was like reading King, and he asked me a very simple question. It's like, it's not about what will happen to you, but what will happen if you don't. If you don't commit yourself to the struggle for a better world. And I think that question has stayed with me because, yeah, it's like, I think sometimes we all take for granted that, like, yeah, we're going to do this event and it's going to be like a big endeavor, and like, free school has its own momentum, and I think sometimes it's easy to take that for granted. But I don't take any of it, because it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of like sweat and blood and struggle and sacrifice for all of us to be part of this and to continue doing what we're doing. And yeah, there's a lot that happens even in the minutia of, like from my specific experience with the 3-day Baldwin celebration of, yeah, like coordinating all of the sound and tech and the logistics for that concert to be the best jam concert that we've ever done. And I don't think I think people see it. I don't know if they see everything that goes on behind it, but yeah, ask yourself the question, not it's like, oh, like, what's going to happen to me? Like, how is this going to affect whether it's my job or even just like my feeling of like being like having like rest or whatever. But it's no like, okay, what will happen if we don't try our best? What will happen if we don't give everything of ourselves to make this the best that we possibly can make it? Especially in the concept, in the context of the Baldwin celebration, like what will happen if we don't give everything in order to do justice to Baldwin, which is also our way of doing justice to the people, and giving and trying to make our contribution to And so that's part of even how I guess rationalize it for myself, or how I justify it. And I think it's different for everyone, but for me, it's always been that question of like, what will happen if I don't, if I don't give everything? And I think the other, I guess, metaphor, like the road to Emmaus, is kind of like, you know, I think part of it is a lot of people encounter through school, and especially young people. And I think there's always that thing of like, okay, like you may have encountered it, but do you actually know like the opportunity that is there? And I guess I feel very fortunate that at some point in my life, like I encountered as I don't know, maybe cliche as it sounds, like that I encountered Martin Luther King or James Baldwin or and I mean that with a full sincerity, basically, because like my life has not been the same. Like the trajectory of my life is not the same post that encounter. And I feel fortunate that I think that I've been able to recognize the importance of what that encounter means. But I don't know if all young people do, and I think part of the effort is to try to involve, or even to give people the chance to have that encounter, especially our generation, because we've been so robbed of that.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of what we did so brilliantly with the Baldwin celebration, was especially across generations, but I think especially for younger people, to have that chance to encounter Baldwin through, like basically to pierce through, like you said, to puncture through all of the noise, all the propaganda, all of the stuff that gets in the way. And so yeah, I think that that's part of it for me. Just like I feel like all of us are on like a journey through our lives, and the encounters that we have matter a lot. And we're trying to, in some ways, like to make Baldwin part of the life world of the city of Philadelphia, and to make him someone that people can encounter in their own life journeys. And so yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. And then the other thing I want to say was also thinking about Fidel's speech, "The Battle of Ideas," which he gave in Venezuela in 1999. So this was after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And yeah, because I've been thinking about that in relation to like the year of Baldwin, what we're doing. And in part, I think the question that emerged in the documentary discussion, which is almost a perennial question for the free school that we get a lot, which is why so much emphasis on the battle of ideas and the ideological struggle?
Yes.
And I don't think these are questions that we should ever take for granted. It's always questions to be reinterrogated and actually thought out and talk through with people, because it's not, I don't think it's both a clear question, but it's not, it's also a complex one. But yeah, I just want to read like a portion of that speech, in which Fidel he's also speaking to students in Venezuela, their Central University, where he says, "We, as in Cuba, the Cuban people, we have had to wage and will continue waging a more difficult battle against that extremely powerful empire," referring to the United States, "a ceaseless ideological battle that they, the United States, stepped up with all their resources after the collapse of the socialist camp, when, fully confident in our ideas, we, the Cuban people, decided to continue forward." And then he continues and says, he says, "We have withstood that warfare coming from that empire. And like in all battles, whether military, political, or ideological, there are casualties. There are those who may be confused, some really are, softened or weakened by a combination of economic difficulties, material hardships, the parading of luxury in consumer societies, and the nicely sweetened but rotten ideas about the fabulous advantages of their economic system, based on the mean notion that man is an animal, moved only by a carrot or when beaten with a whip. We might say that their whole ideological strategy is based on this. There are casualties, but also, like in all battles and struggles, other people gain experience. Fighters become veterans, multiply their qualities, and help preserve and increase the morale and strength needed to continue fighting. We are winning the battle of ideas. Still, the battlefield is not limited to our small island of Cuba. although the small island has to fight. Today, the world is the battlefield. It is everywhere, in all continents, in all institutions, in every form. This is the good side of the globalized struggle. We must defend the small island while fighting throughout the huge world they dominate or try to dominate. In many fields, they dominated almost exclusively, but not in all fields, nor in the same way, nor absolutely in every country. They have discovered very intelligent weapons, but we, the revolutionaries, have discovered an even more powerful weapon, more powerful, that man thinks and feels. We have learned that around the world in the countless internationalist missions that we have discharged in one field or another throughout the world. And suffice it to mention a single figure, that 26,000 human doctors have taken part in these international missions. And yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking about, in part because Fidel's birthday was a few days ago. This was his 98th birthday. Which is, yeah, it's an interesting, also an interesting question of history and chronology of like this whole thing of centuries. I feel like there's been a lot of centuries commemorations, starting with the China conference, and I guess also, you know, there was like Du Bois and Gandhi. But yeah, I think like to address that question, which I think came up in the discussion in response to the documentary roundtable, you know, people are struggling in this country. It's so obvious that, like, in some ways, yeah, like the economic inequality, the economic precarity of people has never been more extreme. And people are struggling to, like, basically day by day to make ends meet. And a lot of people, I think, feel that they don't have time to really talk about things or to talk about ideas or to talk about, you know, like the future and all that stuff. So yeah, it's like the question of like, why should revolutionaries or people who think of themselves as revolutionaries focus on ideas rather than quote unquote material conditions? And I think part of this, and I'm still trying to work it out because I think it's an important question. I'm curious how other people think about it, but part of it is that, you know, it kind of boils down to, I guess, maybe you could call it a question of this chronology that we're speaking of, but especially it's like, I guess it boils down to the question about what really is the substance of the crisis of this time. And it is an economic crisis. It is like a, you know, a crisis of, you could even say a crisis of capitalism in a certain way, but really how we've identified it is a crisis of the legitimacy of the ruling class. And that crisis is kind of comprised or constituted by the loss of legitimacy in the eyes of the American people of, yeah, the legitimacy of this ruling elite. And that is fundamentally at its core an ideological crisis.
Of course.
And I think when we say we are waging this battle of ideas, we are waging an ideological struggle, it is essentially we know that we can't involve, you know, like not everyone maybe will be drawn to it. But I think part of what we proved is that in spite of the economic conditions of the people, or also in response to the economic conditions of the people, there are enough people in this city, and we hypothesize in this country, who are going to be drawn to this struggle of ideas, not in an abstract form, but as a concrete struggle for democracy, also, basically, and the struggle to be free. And part of what we are exploring and investigating and experimenting with in the free school is, like, you can take the exhibit as a concrete example. What happens when you involve the people in that ideological struggle, not as a struggle that we're waging against the people, but a struggle that involves the people in essentially like a new kind of dialogue, a new kind of discussion, a new kind of encounter also with each other. Like, okay, like we know that things are bad, but the question is, what are the people going to do?
Yeah.
And I think so much of what is the tension in this moment is that even if the American people have lost faith in their ruling institutions, have lost faith in, you know, the ruling elite, the question is, do the people have the confidence to say, we can decide the future?
Yes.
And part of what we're trying to inject into the life, like the bloodstream of the city, like in this city, and also in the country, is the to say, no, the people can actually work this out. You don't have to rely on all of these, like these ruling institutions that are spitting in your face anyway, and are trying to basically either propagandize you or just say that they don't care about you at all. And yeah, I just wanted to say that because I think it's an important question of, yeah, like, why does the free school do what it does? And you know, it also, I guess, but gets to the question of like, yeah, like, what is a revolutionary? Who's a revolutionary in this time? Do you need a communist party, for instance? Is there at this point in history a need for a communist party specifically? And I think we would say no, but you know, I think it's a question that's been put on the table, and it's an important question, and it's one that we've talked about. But it gets to the, yeah, like, what is the composition of a free school? What is organizationally, but even ideologically and politically, like, what is, yeah, like, what are we doing in the free school? And I think these are all important questions. And I think the Baldwin celebration in some ways kind of brought into sharper relief, you know, the stakes of what we're doing. But yeah, I just wanted to say that in response to you.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the ideological struggle, it's been like, what concretizes it? Like, why is there like no I guess because like we're gonna talk about the Bangladesh situation soon, which I'm being familiar with. But what is true is that as it states now, people are not emerging, or the state or whomever is kind of also trying to prevent another Baldwin from emerging, so that there wouldn't be, or an attempt in the same way that is being done to Sheikh Hasina, an attempt by the state to outright squash a potential of a continuation of the Black freedom movement. Because the thing about the ideological struggle is that it's kind of the question about how it is a concrete factor is representative in how people can become free or not free. I'm trying to get at it, you know, because I think that it matters as far as it goes from our perspective of how we will engage with the next 6 months, or how we've been engaging already politically, as it were. Like, I think there is something important about that question. What is the ideological struggle? But the other thing on top of that is, like, still comes back to Baldwin for me. Why is Baldwin attacked in the way that he's attacked? Queer or like anti-man, why is he attacked in the way that he's attacked? And what, I guess, do we have to go forward with to make ever clear his revolutionary contribution? Why is also in a similar sense of like a political assassination is also being done on Baldwin, like you had said, to this day. Yeah, that's all I would add to that.
Well, I was thinking about this question of the ideological struggle and the question of who is a revolutionary, what is a revolution, being so closely tied. But again, I think it's also tied to the question of civilization that you were raising at the end. Because if you think about it, what does it mean to have a revolution if it doesn't lead to a higher stage of the human being in terms of ideas, in terms of their conception of what society should be, what human relationships should be, what peace looks like. So, you know, this idea that you cannot separate a revolutionary process from the human beings that the revolutionary process is supposed to transform, which is something that comes clearly out of the Black freedom struggle. It comes clearly out of the anti-colonial struggle, where they don't separate these things, where revolution is not an abstract concept, and actually, I mean, going back to what you had started with about how Baldwin, or how the ruling elite wants to celebrate Baldwin, contrasts with how the free school has chosen to celebrate Baldwin. And this thing you said about how if you listen to these countless articles or look at the substance of these exhibits at these really, like, central institutions of the, of this country, or if you even, like, I've been listening to a lot of the podcasts and so on, and they're, Black people and sort of young Black people who are trying to talk about Baldwin and trying to claim that this is the legacy that we are going to take from Baldwin and carry forward. And you're right, it all seems very insubstantial, nothing new, pretty stale, about identity and this and that. And it made me question over the last few weeks of what does it mean to not take Baldwin seriously? Because I think what it says is that you don't take yourself seriously, And I mean, not take yourself seriously in the sense that you were talking about all the young people in free school, which is a question that confuses me because I guess I don't think about that so much. But even this thing you said that, the character or the way a person presents themselves in the world looks different when they take themselves seriously and believe that they have a higher purpose to serve. Like they could contribute to something that would change society. And I feel all these people who want to narrow Baldwin, they want Baldwin, or they want to take something from him, but they want it the narrowest vision, is because they've lost the ability to see in themselves the potential of a revolutionary. And it also reminds me of going back to the first day of the event during the documentary, when you posed the question to somebody who was asking a question about, do you see yourself as a revolutionary? And I do think it is unique that in free school, and it took me a long time because I always thought it was arrogant to think of myself as a revolutionary. But even that the possibility exists that I can think of myself as a revolutionary, I can think that, I have a purpose to serve in society, that I'm actually capable of making a contribution. I think that is slowly being stamped out of all people. I see it in my own country. And I think it's related to this question of civilization and, revolution and the ideological struggle, because if you don't see the ideological struggle as an essential part of being a revolutionary, or the revolutionary process, then you can separate the human being from what the outcome of a revolution is. And so then you can have a revolution and it cannot lead to a higher stage of human thinking. It can lead to people not believing that they have agency. And oh, by the way, I forgot to say this, in the podcasts, when they discuss Baldwin, I was shocked that there is no mention of Black struggle anywhere.
Yes.
I mean, they talk about Blackness, but always as victims of an unjust system, never as revolutionaries or agents of transformation. Which, I mean, when you read Baldwin, when he's talking about King, when he's talking about Medgar, when he's talking about Malcolm, what else could he be describing except for the capacity of Black folk, despite how they had been treated in this country, the fact that they had the agency, they had the capacity to transform not just Black America, but all of America, So if you can't see this, you can't see yourself ever in a position to change anything or be responsible for anything or anyway. So, I don't know how to end, but
No, I mean, but that's the thing about the like the question about the ideological struggle. Like, what is the truth? What's the striving of this time? And like, I was talking with Emily, and she was saying something about how, yes, it's about having a peace movement, something about peace. And what we've been talking about, or at least trying to define what that be about love in a simpler term. But what that really means, what that call really is about, is this is almost trying to reach the stage that the Black freedom movement was going towards, which is a unity of the world in the struggle for peace against white supremacy and war. And that is the one thing that the ruling elite is afraid of entirely, because but it's like, what that would mean is a new level of consciousness, a new confidence in building what you're saying, society, and a maturity, which is all things that Baldwin also speaks about. And I do think that it's about time, at least for myself, to be transparent about where I stand on these issues. And I think that the problem of what the ideological headwinds do is that it makes it impossible to stand on these almost simple things of truth, love, and humanity. But I think that's the thing that makes me most emotional about what you had said about us all. And that's what I just wanted to add, just as a side note, really, to, because it's, to be brief, the ability to stay on post is not, and should not be understated. And this means that even when you walk alone, you're never alone. You always have, like, the force of truth, the force of love with you, which is what you're saying, the people that, don't announce themselves, but serve as a presence or serve as a power to move forward on that exact same basis that really brought you, and I'm speaking about Doc here, which is a part of the revolutionary process to bring us all to what we at least deserve, which is freedom and a full democracy. And, and what I mean by that is, like, not to sound flowery, but in essence, I believe that, art can be free, that education can bring us to new levels of human consciousness in society. And that's been the case since I got to free school. It's true that even before I came to free school, that's what I was looking for. There's nothing really else I can do. But that's just to say that even if I came to this position or this understanding at the time that I did, that doesn't mean that it didn't exist for anybody else who I was, running with or growing up with. And that doesn't mean that they're gone either. And that's also what I mean, that it means a lot to stay on post.
Oh, I'm off topic now. But thinking about what you were saying about, seeing these exhibits and these sort of celebrations that seem to only see Baldwin as sort of a victim or not, an agent in the world around him. My first thought on that, and I'm lifting heavily from an essay called Standing on the Shoulders of Complex Female Characters. But, I think a lot of the work that we saw, these really lackluster exhibitions, strikes me as having been made not because the people making them sincerely cared about Baldwin or engaging with Baldwin or what he had to say or thought that they could be like him, but they wanted to show that they are the kind of people who might engage with Baldwin.
Right.
That's fair.
Cultural signaling.
People
Right.
might engage. Yes.
Not because they'd even necessarily read the books, but they want to be seen as the kind of people who might want to, or the kind of people who might really read Baldwin.
Right.
But I really sort of like that way of framing it in terms of whether or not we can see ourselves as real agents in the world around us instead of, life and culture and all these sorts of things just happening to us and ourselves as consumers or recipients. I think there really is something big to be found in, we can build bridges, we can work together, we can make change, we can change our own minds, we can change other people's minds, and it's not that we are the kind of people who might, it's that we're the kind of people who do.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I was thinking of, firstly, it was very beautiful to hear about this idea of the autobiography of, the young, basically all of us. But I was thinking that, this is, and I don't know if I speak for all of us necessarily, but I think to a large extent, most of us, we do come from a certain kind of a very protected upbringing, in the sense that we didn't have to, we basically really got to have an image of ourselves that we wanted, which was, it was very cordial at every step of the way. And basically we didn't have to, fight to really think of ourselves as the way we may have wanted to at a point. And I think, I was thinking when you were speaking that, it is true that at some point this, this idea comes that you're not satisfied with what you thought you were all about.
Right.
Even though you were,
Right.
even though you were given everything you thought you wanted. But, I was thinking that this, to recognize, to go back to what Ruba was saying and what Grace was responding to, I think it's, this, at this time, it's true that not everyone and most people perhaps are not, thinking of, or, have the confidence or the faith in themselves to think that they are capable of making a contribution to the world. But I think increasingly we're also at a time where, unless you do see it, it's two different questions of whether or not you think you can make a contribution. But if you don't see that, I think we're at a time when it's very easy to actually make a contribution on behalf of the ruling class. And, maybe we'll get to this, more when we go to Bangladesh, for instance. But, that's just an example. But, we do have, our generation increasingly has more power in their hands than they've had at any point in history, where in the sense that they are, in the age of, social media and so on and so forth, but where it has sort of been established that revolutionary movements are to be led by the people and not by individuals. This is the ruling class narrative of how, this is literally the democracy playbook, by which the software theory operates and so on. So this idea that individuals play a role is, at this point, I think it's more attractive. In some distorted sense, it's more attractive than ever before. And unless we do see that we can make a contribution on our own terms, there is no other way than to not be a counter-revolutionary at this point. Where, it's very easy to be manipulated and used by the ruling elite, which also serves a certain kind of personality, which maybe, what you were talking about, why do some people come and why do some people stick in free school and why do some people, don't? Why would people come, get an idea and then keep a distance from it? It's and I was thinking of this in relation to Baldwin, because I think in some ways, I'm thinking of how we have been talking about this for some time now, but about the question of the human being. And I think the search for Baldwin, as the ruling class searches for it, or as it encourages people to search for Baldwin, that's a search for the individual. And what we're really trying to do is to search for the human being. And I think this distinction is this distinction is, basically the fact that to search for the human being, I think it requires a constant, self-excavation, the self-examination, which, of course, the ruling class is afraid of. Like for people to ask of themselves, to question every assumption that they've held about themselves and the world at every step of the way, which is like what Baldwin is telling through like literally everything he says. That's what he's constantly urging, that it's not only that that's the way forward, but you are capable of doing it. On the other hand, at this time, the search for the individual is a very easy search, because all you have to do is you have to claim it, because the individual is held up by the ruling class, where the search for your identity, the search for the queer movement, and so on and so forth. That's all of these ruling class movements are based on this idea that you can claim your identity, but you don't have to think about what to use it for. Like there's no there's no end to the question of the search for the identity of the individual. Whereas what we're trying to do, I think, is this act of constant renewal. And this is, I think it is something that sets the free school apart, because this is why we don't really see Baldwin as an isolated figure. We think of him as, and at the same time as we think of Du Bois or a King. And King talks about, it all the time. I was recently I'm listening to his speech, The Knock at Midnight, where he talks about the Bible story about a friend going to somebody's house in search of 3 loaves of bread. And King talks about how like today we are in need of the bread of faith and hope and love. But then he also says that the task of the revolutionary today is to keep the bread fresh, because else it's not worthy of the people. And I think that's something. I think what we're trying to do, this. I think this clarifies something for me regarding the ideological struggle, because it's not about holding the right opinions on something that's going on in the world. It's about the search to renew it, because people are going to know the truth, and you can only be taken seriously by the people if people see the same search in you as they see in themselves. Right. And I think that does, this question of the, the Communist parties and of like 100 different kinds at this point, and all of these, like new ideas coming up, with the left in this country and elsewhere. It's a constant attempt to avoid having to think. And to go back to something that has been formulated, has been established. And I think this like attempt to avoid thinking is also a human trait. It's it's something that it's something especially that like at this time, this is what all the institutions of the ruling class, like beginning with the university, this is what it teaches us, that like your purpose in life is to stop thinking, so that you can free yourself from But yeah, I think this is what people, when they come into contact with the free school, this is something that I think people do see. And yeah, with the exhibition especially, and the concert and the documentary, it was very clear that there is a very basic difference when we engage with these conversations, with even when questions are hostile, and even when it's a direct attack, the way it's responded, it's always a search for it's always a search for the truth, and not it's not like we're talking about a year of Baldwin and not a year of me. This is how a lot of people try to celebrate it. Yeah, go ahead.
You made me think about it, because I'm like, oh, wait, why? Because I'm still in the question, like, why is Baldwin okay, we do King, we do Du Bois, we do Paul Robeson, but the New York Times is not coming out with an article against Paul Robeson. And why is Baldwin almost every major institution is like, no, I need to have a narrative about Baldwin that exhibits, the ruling class interest. And I'm like, you know, I guess because this whole thing about culture is a big deal for like the ruling elite, or maybe it's one of its biggest weapons against the people. That Baldwin becomes such a figure that needs to be not revolutionary. But we're saying that he is the figure that he is because he is a revolutionary, which kind of like, I don't know why I feel that it's through Baldwin that we're like pulling under like the balls and like ripping something open like that we haven't, in a sense, like done before. Like we haven't hit a nerve like this
Yeah,
at this moment.
like the crux of the ideological.
Because I think he's a man of culture, and the whole thing about culture as being like a tool for the ruling elite, like
Yeah, well, because I guess one way of putting it is whether you call it culture or you could say more pointedly like propaganda. In some ways, the ruling class recognizes something which most leftists have not realized, which is that the ruling class, all of the investment in propaganda, especially around Baldwin, but in general, especially with the election, that reveals that actually, like we're saying, ideas do matter, and that consciousness matters. And so in some ways, the ruling class, by saying actually like we need to devote so much of our energy, and this is part of what Raju brought up in the science symposium, the state is not just about who has, I guess, the authority to defend like the means of production, whatever, but part of it is the ideological, like the reproduction of the ideological relations in society. And it also goes back to things that Doc, you had talked about kind of like the long arc of the 20th century and how part of the reason why we no longer would need something like quote unquote a Bolshevik party or a vanguard party is that the level of people's consciousness is not the same as it was in Russia in like 1917. And a Bolshevik party, a vanguard party assumes a certain level of consciousness, and that has advanced in part due to the world communist movement, but also because of the world anti-colonial struggle, the civil rights movement, all of those things. And but yeah, I just have been thinking about that because like you're saying, the ruling class would not feel the need to basically package Baldwin in a certain way if it did not also, in its own logic, recognize the importance of the ideological struggle. And no matter how weak their hand is, they still recognize that is a central task. And the other way that I've been thinking about it too is, part of what Baldwin has meant to us and to me is like it's almost like he puts this question to you of like, why doesn't anybody in America actually take responsibility for this country? And I think part of that is, I guess you can say, the question of democracy, but also I guess the question of like freedom and necessity and all that. But I feel like we've reached a point, even philosophically, but also just in terms of who we are as free school, of it's like, okay, who's going to take responsibility for this country? I will. Who's going to try to work through the ideas that will define the future of this country? I will.
Wait, actually,
And that's part of what Baldwin means to people. It's like Baldwin puts a question to you of like, okay, like no one's taking responsibility for this country. Okay, I'll do it. And it's not an egotistical thing, but it's like, that's the moral imperative. And that is essentially, it's like Baldwin, and I think Emily has also talked about this, but like Baldwin is the entry point through which ordinary people can be like, okay, like, I don't know what's going to happen in the future and I can't control everything, but it's like, I'm going to take responsibility. And I think for me, like, I think that's also been one of like, I guess one of the central categories of how I've understood Baldwin since the first encounter, which is like, we did an event in at Cornell, like a reading pop-up. We called it a reading pop-up, like, but we called it our inescapable responsibility. And I think Eddie, that was actually, I think, one of the first events. So Eddie, I caught Eddie's attention because he was like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? Like, what responsibility? And like, why is it inescapable? And like, what does that mean? And yeah, like, but that's kind of, even the irony of these elite universities and institutions is that even while you're being trained to basically become kind of the new governing elite in society, simultaneously, the irony of it and the contradiction is that all of these students feel that they have no control, that they're all basically being led towards this path and that they have no control over it, and that really all the best that they can do is just try to like make do and to try their best to like gain like some semblance of like security or stability or whatever within that existing system. And so part of the stance that we were taking was actually, no, like you have responsibility, and that whatever that can lead you towards whatever, but like we can't accept this whole thing of like we have no control over what happens and over our own lives. Actually you do have a responsibility to this world. And I think that has always stuck with me as like that's part of what Baldwin, like he puts it like right directly into your consciousness, and there's no way you can really get around it. There's no easy way of just kind of avoiding it. And I don't know, I feel like that has been.
Could we just let Grace come in and then maybe, then we'll just return to the Kathy's report on the Democratic Party. Go ahead, Grace, and then maybe Sophie.
I had two small notes. One, I've got a great book on that I'm working through right now about that weird sort of contradiction of like, ooh, like the future leaders of society are being trained here and nobody feels like they can do anything. I'm going to be honest, it's a terrible book. Called the Meritocracy Trap. It's got great ideas. The book sucks, but it's worth reading.
Something about
no, it's really poorly edited, but the ideas are really solid. But if anybody decides to pick the book up and they're like, why would Grace recommend this? I know, but a lot of it really centers around like class reproduction and, you know, especially once people have kids, right? If you want your kids to have the best opportunities and the opportunities to be trained to be the future leaders of society, then you need to stay in line and, you know, stay working 80 hours a week at some corporate law firm, you know, so you can make the money to keep that happening. You know, and then the kid's job is to, you know, continue putting in like 80 hours a week studying and, you know, building up their resume so they can do the exact same thing. But it's a really good observation, and I hadn't thought really about how Baldwin ties into that. So thank you for that. The other one, the other week I went to a great lecture at the Parkway Central Library about COINTELPRO. And one of the things that they pointed out that I didn't know beforehand was that they used to hire a whole group of people at the FBI whose whole job was to read Black literature. That was their whole thing. That was what the FBI was paying them to do. And that showcases like how important and how powerful those ideas are. You know, and just how worried that ruling class is. But definitely what you said resonated with me, and I'm going to have to go back to the little Baldwin that I have read so far and try and loop that in.
Or you can join one of the readings.
I'm just about to tell her.
I can't join the reading groups
Guess you need to make more reading groups.
because I don't have a car and I don't have internet or time, but I want to.
Oh, go ahead.
Well,
Shantan.
I was thinking about something that Jeremiah was saying. You know, Baldwin wrote a lot about the student movement in the 60s, and he was very respectful and appreciative of the students, even going so far as to write that these are the people who are going to make freedom real for the rest of the country.
Yes.
But at the same time, he also wrote that the people of America should really be asking themselves that why are these young people leading this movement? What are you doing? this is the time for them to live and study and build their life and look forward to a future worth living. And that is your responsibility, the generation that has already been through their young adult lives. It is your responsibility. And it is shameful that these are the people who are sacrificing their education, their lives, their family, and are at the forefront, are the vanguard of these people. And I think that, Baldwin, he's very balanced. He's I feel like giving due respect to the student movement. He also, has this immense amount of. It's an ask. I don't know how else to put it. It's an ask of the nation at every stage that step up, do something.
Yeah.
And that made me think about, what we were talking about revolution, and how the point of a revolution is to march or struggle and seek ideological clarity. And I feel that Baldwin, throughout his life and through all of his writings, has tried to do just that. He has tried to say, this is an issue and this is being sold to you in this way, but this is the underlying subtext, this is the underlying history, this is the underlying motivations, and you have to sort of see through all of these machinations of the ruling class, the ruling elite. And in the same vein, he says that, do not strive for safety, do not seek and cower in safety. You have to embrace complexity. And if you cannot embrace complexity, you cannot embrace life. If you cannot, expose yourself to the dangers and the reality of life, then you will never be able to understand it, and hence never be able to get this ideological clarity. And I guess you were saying that the point of revolution is ideological clarity, a proper chronology. And getting to a proper chronology, Baldwin has probably, I don't think I've ever, maybe once or twice, but he's not talked about Marx a lot. But does that mean that he's never read Marx? Definitely has. But I think that even without realizing it, he understood that for the American context, that's not the way. He's always brought it back to the auction block, always brought it back to the blues that started there. And he's always said that, okay, this is what formed us as a people, and this is what formed America as a nation, and not Marx, and not these European ideals. And I guess the third part of a revolution is the recognition of a revolutionary. And this I've always found interesting, because we're reading Dangerous Road for Martin Luther King at the Wooden Shoe. And while we're reading it, I guess we're trying to keep alive this one question in everybody's mind, that why did Baldwin write this 20-page essay about Martin Luther King? Why did he spend so much time meeting Martin Luther King, talking to his wife, his father, and writing this whole thing? That was the act and the process of recognizing a revolutionary and writing about him, so that he could, give to the world his view of Martin Luther King, and saying, this is what is a revolution and what has been necessary to produce, so that it can act as almost a blueprint for the future. And I guess in a way, the preschool is also doing the same thing, recognizing Baldwin as a revolutionary, in acknowledging the proper chronology, and in striving for ideological clarity. I think that we are struggling for a revolution. And just the last thing that I'm going to say is that I know everybody's parents have been talked about today.
Okay, I'm done. I'm over. I'm over.
And I just wanted to say that my mother doesn't understand what I do here, but she has told me that she's very glad that I'm doing something that is giving me purpose, and it's not my work. You know.
Wow.
My father is different. He said you've gone there to study, get your degree, get your education, get your experience, and get out. You know. But my mother has been supportive of this. And I talked to her about all our events. She knows I'm at this right now.
That's what's up. That's saying a lot.
And well, it's parents and your childhood shape you, but you shape yourself.
True that. Okay, maybe. Okay. I think maybe we have to go on to the. Go ahead, Derek.
All of us get experience in our life, and I'm coming forward with my own life. And, my models in life, they always be like the reality of like, not just reading about writers, like you're reading about something that you don't want to know about. My experience of like having all of these different model characters, and then somewhere in our life, we embody the characteristics that give us some of our own character. But a person like Baldwin, in my exploration of life, is that I'll put him ahead by years. And he asks, for me, it's like a signal that, you know, you're headed in the right way. But for the young people in the church, I came from out of the church that I grew up on the block out from 2 and 3 years old. Prince of Peace Church. So for y'all destination, and I've been with Tony from day one, is this thing at the Church of the Advocate, and that's a monumental part of the foundation. And then you turn right, you go to Unitarian Church. Here go another tremendous territorial foundation. And then you end up, I'm sitting here at the Church of the Crucifixion, and all of the things that y'all are like not wrestling with is things that are human beings. They will make the announcement that you either the Lord will wrestle with you or you're gonna wrestle with the Lord. But the Lord usually bring us through this wrestling kind of period. And Baldwin, you know, he was raised in the church. I was raised in the church, told him too. We all had to go through something that showed, you know, that we have some upward strength in us, you know, the good and the bad. Sometimes it's the good and the bad, playing against each other. But for me to realize all of y'all lessons in life, it's part of my own life-giving things that I want to give back in life. Things I learned about my life being with other students and being with other instructors and teachers, and not violating those things that I love the way how they exist like that. So you just don't give up on a person that you with, because it's a hard fight sometimes. You know, I'll tell Tony, we might go round for round with people, but when you start taking the whole city round for round, the city starts saying, okay. You might have to go back to our corner man. Yeah. Because this is a part of y'all physical corner here. To be able to rejuvenate and bring all of the hidden talents that we all have. They ain't hitting no more. I'm listening to Tony talking through y'all. Like he's mind some of y'all voices. I don't want to hear everybody's privacy. Baldwin gave the world his privacy. It's a part of my life. That's a part of my private life. I've raised my children. That's a private part of my life, but I'm willing to be in my public life. It's the community form of my life. You know, and then you respect it once you have the respect of what it is to have respect. Is that you will to hear a little bit of disrespect, but you're not going to take disrespect like facing another person, because the person's going to feel you inside that you haven't like took all your young years and made a reckless mess out of. And it's a lot to have courage to keep yourself well built or keep yourself well together, because we don't know all of the lessons that the Almighty, I call Almighty, is going to bring us, to where it's not our end. I ain't looking at our end. It's going to be the end for people that's just working on things that had no end to it at all. Where Baldwin, I just took the fire and down, but I don't want to make it like there's some miserable thing going on with the fire. It's an anvil. It's an anvil and a hammer for me. Somebody got to be, remade, and it's not no easy work to bring, your young self, into life, and we all is going through a reckoning too. But there's some people out here in this world, they hanging on every day. They just home, they hanging their own self because they can't go on without the voice of Baldwin. Or you mentioned Castro. These people went to church when they was young too. It wasn't like neither of these places. You know what I mean? And yeah, you're gonna have fear. You're supposed to have fear of the Lord, but not fear of what it is that's bringing you to do this awesome kind of job. King spoke about it. Muhammad's Gandhi spoke about it. The biography, the autobiography, I was sitting and thinking about the autobiography of the yoga, because I had to read all these books, trains of books coming up. Now, I can't be fighting all these people out in all these different continents. I'm trying to find out how a man thinks and how a woman thinks and how does a child think too. So that we can come to better terms with ourselves and come to better terms with people whoever we face, because you can speak to, as I heard y'all, voicing your concerns, voicing what it is you don't want nobody to drag you through 25 more years, just roll you over like you ain't nobody.
Right.
So we'll turn it over to Kathy.
Call this time.
I don't think it's
Hi, Grace.
Well, I knew today would be a really emotional school, but I think it's really, I didn't realize that our conversation yesterday, and I know I'm supposed to speak on the DNC event, I want to just be able to respond a little bit to what you said, because I'm just trying to feel, put together what it is that I'm thinking, because I think this has stirred a lot for me, because when I came by your house yesterday, you could tell, I think I was in all kinds of emotional states. And I just was trying to figure out where it really boiled down to. And I didn't expect for it to so much inform the conversation today. But it makes all of the world of sense that if you laid it out in relation to our, making sense of the Baldwin celebration events, but also where we are headed, what is our relationship to the people, the crisis of this time, and so I just want to just briefly say the reason why I really wanted to ask you what I asked you or talk about what I talked about was because I've been saying to a lot of people that these past few years, but especially these past few weeks, because of the level of what we are doing and what the struggle it really takes to do what we do has demanded so much from us that I think also we are being changed so quickly in some ways, all for the better, but sometimes it is really hard to wake up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror and look at yourself and realize you are not even the same person as you were a week ago. And that is how I felt putting together working with everybody to put together the exhibition. And I wonder if that's how other people felt working on the documentary, because I know that was an immense endeavor, and perhaps also the concept. We stretched ourselves to the absolute limit, and we grew, and we actually found we have even more to give. We have even more to grow. And that has been the most beautiful thing, but it was also really scary. And the thing is, I realized, like, having a conversation, actually specifically with Nuri too, it was that the reason why sometimes I had all these different outbursts, I didn't eat the best, I didn't sleep that well. I had a lot of different emotions come up for me, is also because so much was being challenged, so much was being tested. And who I was also being raised as a question through all this. But the beautiful thing that I think Nuri specifically helped me realize is that it was clear that everything I've done up until this point, every decision I've made, was because I was sometimes driven by things I did not fully understand, that I just knew I had to do, I had to follow. And actually it parallels this quote that I feel very much, and like it corresponds to what we were saying about like how from a very young age, maybe it was because you grow up in America, a white society, and you feel so made to feel so small or so cornered, or like so like you're not meant to really even know yourself, and in some ways or you are kind of spoon-fed what your purpose should be, and what your path should be, and it's very like confined or premeditated, and that you're meant to just follow it, and like you never really do end up knowing yourself or the world or other people or the truth or what you can do, what you can contribute. But I just knew that was not gonna be me. But the thing is, the quote I was thinking about that we used actually in the curatorial statement is actually, I feel like, really apt for the situation. Like Baldwin wrote, ultimately the artist and the revolutionary function as they function, and pay whatever dues they must pay behind it, because they are both possessed by a vision, and they do not so much follow this vision as find themselves driven by it.
Yes.
I just feel like it was actually, I was like, oh my God, the curatorial statement is actually so deep. It's so apt for this, because I feel like the thing that I came to realize in the process of working on, the exhibition, but essentially it was 3 days honoring Baldwin on his 100th birthday, for this time and for the city of Philadelphia, was actually that it has been beautiful and excellent and great that I feel like the instincts that I had have taken me as far as I have, but actually there comes a time that you must also be able to, especially as a revolutionary, not only just feel driven to follow something, but also that that's part of also deciding the direction, like that you grow in and go, and like you have a choice to like actually possess, I think, what it is that is transforming you, and like internally be able to not just like feel like pushed by forces external or even internal that are mysterious to you, but actually be able to maybe even harness it or match it, or be able to like know what it is that really makes you who you are and what you must do. And so I feel like because so much of what that process was like was such a mystery, almost so scary for me, that I had to like confront so many fears. The next thing I started thinking about was really the future and what will become of all of us. And it was all really like, I was not frightened of that, but I was telling you I was frightened I might like lose my way, or I might like, I really hope there comes a day where I don't forget what this means. And what you said to me that like yesterday was really, 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 really moving, because you said, you know, all of us have made it this far, but especially you, like these instincts are gonna guide you for the rest of your life. Even if you lose your way, like your instincts will tell you you're like completely off the track. Yeah. And so then, that was really important for me to hear, because I feel like it helped me remember like when I was feeling the most, I think, like confronted with the tensest moment, I suppose, when we were, you know, trying to install the exhibition, and we were immediately like, as we were working so hard to like put together the finishing pieces, knowing how little time we really had right before, like we were putting together an exhibition in the cases on Friday afternoon. We wanted to come here early, finish that up, and like help with setup. but instead we were starting to realize, oh, this is actually going to be an ideological battle. And it was not something we all knew that we could not like roll our eyes and be like, oh, can't we just put together like logistically this exhibition and be done with it? No, we had to work out these questions. And actually in some ways we won over, or we made so many strides, like we worked really, really closely with, I'll just say it, like Grace and Emma, who like in some ways like our vision and our working things out, I feel like brought us much closer. I think, but I think that like in some ways we like that's the thing where I was like, I really in the past like was used to the idea that like ideological struggle like maybe happened like in our reading groups or here, but actually ideological struggle in the public sphere, with people who are not part of free school, institutionally, really matters. Like it really, really matters, and it's really concrete. And also the site, we've talked about how the Free Library should be a site of ideological struggle. And so it was like the hours leading up to the second or the third day, and I was trying to get my head straight for the tour, but that's also when we received, I think, a second, or in fact, like an increasingly, like that was when we got the most pointed feedback, criticism that the exhibition like spoke so much about Baldwin as part of the Black struggle, but nothing about how he was at the helm of the queer struggle. And it was like increasingly clear to me that what we were talking about was really important today. How when you miss the fact that the Black struggle or the ideological struggle is in this is humanity to be free, you then basically negate the power of any like revolutionary movement, if that even exists for you. Like everything is just for like getting these little pieces or like queer struggles for queer people, Black struggles actually just for Black people, and actually what are they really struggling for? Right. And like to hear that so concretely in front of me was like so appalling. It was, but at the same time it was so important. And so I just want to say that. And it was actually because I didn't talk about it, I guess, like during the concert, I also really had this, like, it was, I think, realizing, like, oh, my life is going to be one of immense struggle. It is going to be one of the, like, I will not be, like, satisfied not living a life of immense struggle, but it'll be really hard. But then it was when, like, Alfie started playing, and, like, you know, A Love Supreme, Naima, like, everything else. And then also, like, the Philadelphia Sound, what is it, like, I'm forgetting the name of that song. He always plays something for them. Something for them. Anyways, it was almost like all of a sudden my heart like opened up, and I was like, but actually this is really where I have actually started to begin to live. Like I'm turning 26 in like less than, like a little over a month, but actually like, and I actually feel like my life, because now I have Baldwin, now I have the free school, I have you, Doc, I have everybody here, I have all that, like we need to move forward. Actually, now is when I've truly begun to live. Everything was preparing me for this moment, but I just like was like, yeah, it is going to be a struggle, but it's also going to be so beautiful, and I wouldn't want to do anything else, which is why I like had a little breakdown and put myself back together to be able to help like clean up the church so that we can do more of the exhibition next thing. I've spoken too much, I feel like, but I feel like, yeah, the beautiful thing.
I just say, ask a question. I know you have to go. You use the phrase possessor, which is transforming you. Could you just say a few words? That's a very interesting formulation. Possessing what is transforming you.
Good question, because I feel like most people who know me know I have very strong impulses and instincts. And I'd like to, I think the thing is they have sometimes guided me to take leaps, like move to Philadelphia, even when I didn't know people very well, or even to like stick with some things. Like it wasn't guaranteed that when I was at Cornell that I could fully reconcile with the breadth of the ideas that were being presented at like our reading group, which in a sea of identity politics, in a sea of like, I don't know, all of these distractions that I have even internalized and thought, like, you know what, I think that like the best I can do as somebody who's interested in ideas and art is just to like accommodate myself to really try to make myself a job, try to make myself, you know, get a little something out of all of this. But actually the like ideas of the reading group were presenting something so different, and I was actually not sure it was entirely something I could actually handle, or like find it fit in my life, because I was actually beginning to create, like, I think, a contradiction in my head about where my life would go. But essentially, I feel like my instincts were to maybe see what it is and stick with it. And I took my time with it, but I'd like in the, going forward into, like, because we are reaching a certain stage of the struggle, or of what we're doing in preschool, we're increasingly more and more, like, that's what I feel like we're thinking about. Like, I don't want to take it back to the top of the conversation, but what Jeremiah started by saying, like, we don't want to take any of this for granted. Just because we were doing this yesterday, just because we were doing a month ago, just because we were doing it last year, doesn't mean, like, okay, that momentum will keep going. That's the same reasons even that what brought us here to do things in Philadelphia with the free school are the same reasons that we want to keep going. In fact, the struggle is going to test us more and more, and we also are going to be pushed and pulled, but actually internally we not only renew what it is that, like, keeps us going, but also find more and more of, like, we learn from the world, we get more clarity on what it is that we're doing. What we're doing is right, and we grow and learn and just take better responsibility or ownership, or I don't know if there's a better word right now. I'm a little at loss for words, because I know I spent the last, like, hour trying to think about how best to talk about this beautiful event that, like, Magna Jahan and Neha putting together, and also all of us in preschool. But I also just want to say that, because this has been a really, I just feel really humbled. And whenever you say anything of this magnitude, and like, to either introduce before I speak, or like, I'm still at a loss for words, but this is exactly the sort of thing that I'm like, I don't just want to be disarmed by what you're saying. I actually want to really take it to heart. And I think sometimes humility is one of those traits where I don't just want to be a little, like, embarrassed or ashamed by, like, the fact that you're putting all of us, like, on blast, but actually I want to, like, really actually feel what it is that you're saying, and actually, like, take it to heart. Take it seriously. So it means a lot. Okay, so next week. I would like to just say a few things. I hope that I'll say a few things about the events. I think Jeremiah mentioned a little also at the beginning of the live stream, and then whatever I missed, I hope everyone can also help expand on. But so as we all know, the Democratic National Convention is going to take place next week in Chicago, and already it is something that we have been thinking a great deal about, and I know the American people, but the whole world has been greatly anticipating, and for all the right reasons, that right now the contradictions, the crisis of legitimacy, the genocide in Gaza, and then also just all these decades of just evisceration of the American people and the world, like, that the Democratic Party and essentially the ruling class has been inflicting upon humanity, I think makes it a really important time for the American people to actually challenge the DNC, or challenge the ruling class. But the question is how so? And, like, we've talked a lot about chronology, we've talked a lot about the importance of Baldwin in this moment. Baldwin's a theorist of crisis. And so I think, I feel really, 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 really grateful that this event is happening, and that will be, essentially it'll be 2 days, as we mentioned before, Wednesday, August 21st, and Thursday, August 22nd. Both days will be 5 to 7 p.m. Central Time / 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the times were chosen actually strategically so that they would take place right before a lot of these important convenings of the Democratic National Convention, the important speeches that, like, people like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden will be giving. So I think it is actually which is really deliberate. And also, of course, this is an online event taking place. That will be live streamed from the Free School's YouTube and Facebook channels. I meant to mention the title of the event sooner, but it is Breaking Free from the House of Bondage. James Baldwin speaks to the 2024 election. And so it's very clear, of course, it is really rooted in Baldwin, and especially like that essay that I think Baldwin wrote in 1924. Is that right? Yeah, like Notes on a House in Bondage. House of Bondage. Yeah, and I think it is an excellent way, entryway for the American people to be thinking about, the ongoing crises domestically, and then the realigning world order, and also how the new criteria for movements and for the future will be set, and just that struggle for the creation of a new American people. I'm kind of deviating a lot from, I feel like, the notes that I had, but actually I also just wanted to say I increasingly really like the event poster and flyer that Magna Johann had put together, and it features this painting by Aaron Douglas called Judgment Day, and it is of, I'm gonna pull it up and look at it a little, but yeah, it's actually this very beautiful, just in that, Aaron Douglas's characteristic art style of figures that are a little more geometric, but really it's of this huge winged figure, Gabriel, who's blowing a trumpet, and there's actually this zigzag lightning that's coming down from that, and then there's rays of light coming down from the sky, and then there are people kind of crying and on their knees below, and there's kind of waves at the bottom that kind of suggest Judgment Day, but it's most likely inspired by the first line of Notes from a House of Bondage, where Gabriel's trumpet is a complex metaphor, and the idea of awakening, or the idea of reckoning, I think is actually really important in this. Gabriel's trumpet is a complex metaphor. Poor Gabriel is not only responsible for when we awaken the dead heavy enough, but he must also blow that trumpet to wake the children sleeping. And then he goes on to say, the children are always ours, every single one of them, all over the globe. And I am beginning to suspect that whoever is incapable of recognizing this is incapable of morality. Or I am saying, in other words, that we, the elders, are the only models children have. What we see in the children is what they have seen in us, or more accurately, perhaps, what they see in us. And I feel like the essay goes on to actually hit really home in terms of the political crisis even Baldwin was witnessing, and around even the election of that year that he was writing about. But just how do you open an essay with that? And also I'm really glad that this is essentially, I feel how we want to also see ourselves in this time. Back to the event. Let's see, the first day of the event, so that would be Wednesday, August 21st, is entitled James Baldwin as a Theorist of Crisis. And that will discuss how Baldwin's formulations of the crumbling of empire and of safety and whiteness can help us understand the current moment. And I think, also tying in and expounding upon providing more nuance to what we've been talking about in terms of Antonio Gramsci's interregnum. I think there's also, that will be, I think, a panel discussion with, or a roundtable discussion with UDOC, Jahan moderating, me, Purva, Jeremiah. Okay, I think that is everybody. And then the second day will be titled, that would be Thursday, August 22nd, James Baldwin and the Creation of a New American People. And that will be seeking to understand the forces trying to shape the future of this country, including the Democratic parties like Kamala campaign, but also the populist movement, the left, but also the marches on the DNC, including also the student encampments for Gaza, but also really letting the fact that this year, the Saturday Free Schools Year of Baldwin has actually made a lot of achievements and has actually something to say and share for this moment and for like what that direction of the future might be able to hold and what this movement might be able to look like. And all of this will be, roundtable discussion with free school members, but a lot of room for audience participation through the comments, as a lot of our events are. And so I think more information can be found with the Saturday Free Schools, like social media, if not like already exist, like information that we already have, and also in the coming days. So I just feel really honored to be able to speak to this event. I know I wish like Jahan and Megha and Mika were here, but actually getting to speak about this, I feel more and more like emotional and just glad that we're doing something like this. And I just see it as like this great opportunity we all have to, I think, directly head on confront the ruling class and just, how will we do it in the spirit of Baldwin, and how do we have the vision that Baldwin teaches us to really see and ask the right questions and see through, just all the bullshit that surrounds like even whether it's like the DNC itself, but the ruling class propaganda, but even also the ways in which that protest and this like against that has been channeled into the wrong, I feel like, avenues, or even distracting, like not so serious channels. But we have a real opportunity here.
Yeah, I think the discussion will be really interesting, in part because the DNC, as everyone knows, is going to be, also as Kathy said, in some ways, like part of the focus of the world, the eyes of the world would be on the DNC, because as the mainstream media, and also as we've talked about, there are a lot of parallels that are being drawn between this 2024 DNC with the 1968, in which it was rocked by huge protests, also following the assassination of King, and the announcement it was LBJ who announced he wouldn't run again, I think, which, again, parallels this moment. But I think I saw news reports that were saying, like Muslim leaders who are part of organizing protests are estimating that upwards of 100,000 people could be there protesting. And so there's going to be a lot of police presence. There will be a lot of, I think there's going to be a battle also for like where the protesters can even be in the city, like which streets they can use, how much they can actually disrupt DNC. And, even just from what I've been seeing, like even on like Twitter, there's a lot of, I feel like things happening in terms of the propaganda war, the information war, where right now I think there's a lot of like these Twitter influencers, like Black Twitter influencers, who are trying to basically say that like the pro-Palestine movement is anti-Black. And but what they're trying to say that like Kamala stands for Black people, therefore like these influencers who are probably paid by the Democratic Party or have some connection, or like, like for the protesters to target Kamala as anti-Black, and like, they bring up like Arab racism against Black people and all that stuff. And so I think that's also even part of the ideological struggle too. But I think like Kathy was saying, and like we've already said, to me, it's almost less about even like, what would Baldwin say about the 2024 election? I don't think it's really that like cut and dry, but really it's about like through Baldwin, you're able to pierce through all of the narrative, all the propaganda, all of the hype and the noise that is trying to obscure what the election, even like what's really at the heart of the election and why it feels like such a consequential election. Because I've seen also a lot of like mainstream media, they will try to say that this election is not about issues, it's about personalities. And it'll be like, oh, it's Trump's personality versus Kamala's personality, which I think is a gross distortion of what's actually at the heart of the election, which is what we've talked about, which is the crisis of the legitimacy of the ruling class. And Trump, in his own way, although I feel increasingly less optimistic about Trump, just based off of also I think what I feel are the really disgusting things he said about Israel, especially in the past couple of days. Like I saw there's this like speech he gave like to some like Friends of Israel event, which was really bad. And he was, yeah, I don't know. But even, like part of what I think I've been seeing online is like even like Trump's position on the Gaza genocide and basically saying that he's going to back Israel to the hilt and try to get Israel to finish the war faster, which basically can be interpreted to mean they're going to finish the genocide faster, is it's caused a lot of fractures within the MAGA movement, at least from what I've seen online. And there's been a lot of people who are like, how can you be quote unquote America first when it seems like you're putting Israel first? And yeah, I think part of the election, like, although I guess the political form of the election can make it harder to, I guess, see the substance of it, but I think part of it is like almost a referendum on the American empire.
Yes, it is.
And I think that has to be made clear.
Yep.
And no matter what the outcome will be, the question is, what will the people do? And I think that is what gets missing in all of the calculus about who's going to win even. Although that's part of it, it's like the real question is, what are the American people going to do? If they elect Trump, I don't think that that's really the answer either. But I think that says something about where at least a portion of the consciousness of the American people is. And I think at the same time, like we've said this before, and also like you were saying, Doc, but I really feel like there has to be, like, we have to go on the ideological offensive against Kamala and against the Democrats, because they are trying to also act like they have the upper hand right now because they have all the campaign fundraising. There's all this like great positive press around Kamala that's been happening. And I think even Trump, it seems like, is a little caught off guard by all of it. And he doesn't really seem to know the best way to attack Kamala. But I think even beyond that, like, part of it is, I feel like for a lot of, I guess you could say, liberals who may have been disturbed by the genocide in Gaza, I think there's a real question of like what, in some ways, like Kamala represents something psychologically to these people, which I think Baldwin helps you to get at, which I think has to actually be examined, and almost in a ruthlessly honest way, and not in order to bring comfort to anyone, but actually it's like, okay, like there's a reason why I think people are so, whatever social class they're in, I think the figure of Kamala, I think maybe in a similar way to Obama, but there's something like, I think, like almost like psychologically that's happening, which I think has to actually be unpacked and interrogated and critiqued. But I feel like part of it is like, we have to go on the ideological offensive and not be defensive about it. But
can I just say something? Yes. You know, these are abnormal political times.
Yeah.
This is not your normal election. Even the comparison to 1968
right.
are really weak.
Yeah.
This is not 1968. The crisis is much deeper. And I don't think it's, I think in part Trump doesn't know how to respond to this new person that he's running against. But the crisis has become deeper even since he announced. And the Israeli genocide has deepened it. And he, for whatever reasons, cannot and will not separate himself from a genocide.
Yeah.
And he is losing people, Black people and Arabs and Palestinians and good people who would support him as he grovels for Zionist money, which says everything about him.
Yeah.
And therefore, I agree with you. The quote, and I say relative optimism that we may have had about him going forward, because he did say he would be a candidate of peace.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're not that no more. But
As long as it's here.
that's why, you know, like to see him as the man of destiny, no, he is the farce But so be it. That's it's the crisis of the American political system. But also what I wanted to say, the defeat of Harris and the Biden administration for its war crimes and its initiation of war sends a message to whoever wins.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And that's
right,
the
right,
key.
Yeah.
And because we're not going to change whoever wins this election. And so on. So I would say, and just one other thing, I think this is a great initiative by Meghna and Jahan and Neha and them out in the Midwest. It is important, and the demonstrations, you know, I know we had wanted to go, but it's so it's so undefined.
Yeah.
You know, even the demands, and I was listening to one of the spokespeople for the march, and I'm saying, you can't present nothing better than that. You know, and the Black liberation struggle was with us, and now we were there. Come on, fool. But it is obviously, and I hope there are 100,000. And there probably will be. There could be more. And that's because of the anger. By the way, in '68, I think the demonstrations then were even less politically and ideologically clear. They were more spontaneous. So, but I think it's important that we speak at this time, that we give an analysis. The other thing is, I was hoping that several people that I suggested be invited, that they would come. And sadly, they didn't even respond. And I'm going to ask them why. Because when they ask me to be on the show, I'm always, yes, I'll do it, you know. But I don't know why and what's going on. I think that two of the people, if not the three that I recommended, will be in Chicago. And, you know, we have a meeting tomorrow, a planning, don't forget, for the event. And I'm going to, if they want me to, I'll call these people myself, you know, cash in my chips. I mean, come on. But with or without them, it doesn't make all the difference in the world, you know. We can carry this thing. And I think we have to publicize it a lot more, maybe, to get it out there, because I think there will be tremendous interest in this, going beyond Chicago, going beyond the convention. And this convention, I'm looking forward to it, because I don't think we've ever seen any, where they're going to try to coronate one of the most unpopular politicians in the Democratic Party, maybe ever. Girlfriend is not popular, you know, for all kinds of reasons. One, the sense that she was promoted because they needed a ticket that could get Black women at least to vote for him, for Biden. And that her whole time as vice president, she did nothing. And then, to last point, to insult people protesting a genocide that you are part of. Oh, and you're going to tell them you speak, really? I mean, so I say it's going to be, I don't know how they keep it together. I don't know how they hold this together. There has to be a lot of threats, a lot of intimidation, even of physical violence, because even the delegates are unhappy. And even that online vote of all these delegates voted, that was not the final vote. The final vote will take place at the convention, as it must, because that's in the rules of the Democratic Party. So who knows what's going to happen? Biden ain't happy, and even I understand that he is scheduled to speak at a time that's like, you know, a normal congressperson or senator. He's not given a prominent place in the speaking. At least that's what I understand at this point. And they want to highlight Obama, maybe Pelosi, and those kind of people. But here is the problem. And this is why Baldwin is so important. The black vote. I don't care what the polls say. Because see, the other thing is, just from a social science point of view, they don't know how to poll black people. See, when people have that much distrust in the system, they find every way not to participate. Now, the thing that has happened, you know, what they call a polling bias, that more black people are responding to the polls than when it was Biden. Because, you know, black people are funny this way. They feel they got to get behind the sister, you know, so-called. But not all black people. And the thing, and I hadn't understood, that is more interesting than ever before. This is why 68 you can't compare to now. The class division among black people is deeper than it's ever been. You know, it used to be that there was a class divide based on education, profession, that type of thing. It was there, but segregation and stuff pushed us more together, you know? Now, it is probably as wide as the separation between the people and the ruling class, if not wider. In other words, the split and the anger and the sense of class, almost contempt. The poor don't like all of this. And a lot of people don't like this, oh, to get our votes, all you need is Megan Thee Stallion or Beyonce. I mean, why are you going to belittle us like that? But so I'm saying that it's everything is still up in the air. And I agree with you. And it's more than us, you know, but a lot of people who thought that Trump would represent something in terms of an imperial retreat against the neocon. You're showing yourself to be a frightened, scared man who cannot rise to the moment. And the moment, and I think, again, we have to say, the overriding question is war and peace. The Biden administration is an administration of war. 20 billion was just sent last week to Israel. So that's, you know, I think we got a lot to talk about. We got to promote it, you know, and, you know, do everything we can to get viewers of it, you know. Can I ask, is it going to be something like a podcast? Is that the way we're going?
I think it's just going to be live streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But yeah, it'll be at 5 to 7 p.m. Central Time on those 2 days, and then 6 to 8 Eastern Time for us.
Yes. And we should, you know, make sure we send in chats and be in the discussion. Free school people.
We should go to
Okay, so let's go to Bangladesh.
So I wanted to start by saying that last week I think we brought up Bangladesh a little bit, and we were discussing the two kinds of coups really that exist. You have a violent coup, and then you have a soft coup, which nobody seems to be talking about, which happened here in the United States when Biden was forced to step down. And this was an exertion of immense political influence by the Zionist ruling elite. And you can actually see how people who always expect violent coups don't really expect, you know, this kind of soft political coup, which we saw here in the United States. And then when we were mentioning the Bangladesh coup, I remember we got a comment by somebody who said that this is a student protest movement and you are barking mad. But it is understandable that without the proper historical and ideological context in which the school is actually performed, it's hard to understand that this was actually something that was conceptualized inception in the halls of the Western ruling elite, and then transferred to the South Asian countries. And I won't just talk about Bangladesh. I'll talk a little bit about Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar as well, which are also part of this growing excursion to contain India and also have this political influence in the South Asian region, so that you can actually have sort of fighting chance against China. So I wanted to start with a little bit of background, the historical and ideological background that is necessary. So Bangladesh achieved its independence in 1971 under the leadership of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And his daughter Sheikh Hasina has been in power in Bangladesh since 2009. And it has been seen that Bangladesh recently, in the last 10, 20 years, has grown immensely. It's 52 years of independence, has grown immensely. It boasts a GDP per capita greater than India, most definitely of Pakistan and a lot of others. It has a large advantage in these labor-intensive markets. So it is a country that people are looking at in terms of its growth and its potential as an economic as well as an ideological force, because it is important to note that in the last decade or so, Bangladesh has strengthened its relationship with India, it has strengthened its relationship with China, and it has strengthened its relationship with Russia. It has joined the Belt and Road Initiative. It is on the brink of joining BRICS, for which China has supported its bid for membership. And most importantly, it has rejected multiple times to join the Quad Alliance, which actually makes it ideologically closer to Russia and China than even India, which is part of BRICS but is also part of the Quad Alliance.
Right.
Well, it's a alliance between Australia, Japan, India, and the US for some reason. And it's a sort of military and economic alliance
Against China, basically.
against China. And as we know, the US has been desperate to curb the ideological as well as the economic influence of China that has grown more and more. China has been an alternative in terms of its social structure as well as in terms of ideology for a lot of people in the world. And this is essentially what the Cold War was all about, this ideological battle between what is humanity going to go towards, unfettered capitalism and individualism, or do we want to fight for humanity and for all humanities? So the US footprint is very discernible in a lot of recent destabilizations of South Asian countries. In 2016, the US installed a government which was more in line with its policies in Myanmar, and in 2021, that government was eventually overthrown, replaced with a military rule, which the US is not happy about, and has been trying to destabilize Myanmar ever since. Pakistan recently, just this year, you saw Imran Khan being put into jail, and even though he is very well loved in the country and would have been the democratically elected leader of Pakistan if he was not thrown in jail and all of these pressure campaigns and political assassinations, character assassinations launched against him. And Sri Lanka back in 2022 faced a huge financial economic crisis because of a loan that it took from the IMF. And you know where the IMF is basically situated. So you can see that even though it tries to really hide its footprint, the US footprint is very discernible in these destabilizing forces across South Asia. And now, if you come to Bangladesh, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman back in 1972 actually instituted a quota, a reservation for government jobs, saying that 30% of all government jobs will be reserved for the children and grandchildren of the freedom fighters who took part in the Bangladeshi liberation movement. Now, I find it very unique in the whole history of reservations. Like we have reservations for minority communities and women and all of these things. But you know, Sheikh Mujib being part of the peace movement and understanding the sheer importance of the people and the heritage that comes with supporting a liberation movement like the children and grandchildren of people who gave their lives and fought in the liberation struggle of Bangladesh will get a 30% quota for government jobs. Now, the protest against this has continued for a long time. And in 2018, Sheikh Hasina, who was the prime minister at that point, she actually repealed the quota. She repealed the quota after protests for a long time. And then recently, the Supreme Court repealed that quota, so sort of the executive order from the prime minister saying that no, you can't repeal it. And this sparked the student protest movement, which actually snowballed into a much larger movement, taking in like other hitherto politically unrelated groups, and they all started to protest against unemployment, rising inflation. So you have a smaller, more niche issue, which is anti a particular policy, which has turned into an anti-government large-scale protest. And this is very, very reminiscent of the toolkit used for all of the Arab Spring revolutions, the color revolutions that took place in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya. It follows very similar to that toolkit that has been used. And like a lot of people will say that Sheikh Hasina she's been demonized in the Western newspapers a lot. People have called her a dictator and blah blah blah. She's been in power for 15 years. Angela Merkel has been in power for 16 years. But nobody really cares about that.
Yeah, right.
But the question is not what Sheikh Hasina has done, being the democratically elected leader of Bangladesh. The question is that why has the US threatened its sovereignty and threatened the natural course of history of a particular nation state and decided to meddle in their affairs? That is the real question. And these protests that took place were very violent. And this is another thing that is very reminiscent of the Spring Revolutions, where you only show images of one-sided graphic violence, where authorities are attacking these students, attacking civilians, but you never show the opposite side. You never show how these violent mobs are actually attacking authorities and chosen representatives of government. Those are sort of hidden away, and you can only find them in very niche corners of social media. And it's actually been very, it wasn't a principled movement at all. And you can see that because these students who were most likely the children of people who did not support the Bangladeshi liberation movement, which is why they're against the quota in the first place. They were shown to ransack Sheikh Hasina's house, wear her saris, and disrespect her, burn Sheikh Mujib's house, try to drown his statues. I even saw a video of somebody climbing on a statue of Sheikh Mujib and pissing on his head. The utter disrespect, this is not
Which is uncommon to South Asians.
It is very uncommon to South Asians. And Sheikh Hasina eventually had to flee the country, and the US and UK revoked her visa. And then she eventually found a place, asylum in Delhi, India. And right after Sheikh Hasina fled the country, they instituted Muhammad Yunus as the interim prime minister. Muhammad Yunus has no political background, but what he does have a background in is being educated in the West and being very, very close to the Western ruling elite.
And the IMF.
And the IMF. So I think he was given the highest civilian award in America, the Freedom Medal.
The American, Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Yeah.
For what?
Whoa.
He's like a Nobel Prize
Also
economics.
Nobel Peace Prize winner, sharing that,
It's economics.
Economics, sorry. He's a Nobel Prize winner in economics. I was just going to say that he shares the Nobel Prize with other people like Barack Obama and Henry Kissinger, who also got the Nobel Prize. So he got the Nobel Prize in economics.
I think he did get it for peace, even though his work. I think this is one of those things which,
Interesting.
he did most of his work was with the IMF, and he had these ideas of what's called the microfinance loans.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that the prize was still in peace and not for.
That's what I remembered. I thought
It was for peace, not economics.
Yeah.
No, but
Interesting. I never looked it up because
Nobel Peace
ridiculous.
Prize.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. I did read that he got the Nobel Peace Prize.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason why he got it is exactly like he established the Grameen Bank, which is apparently supposed to mean the bank of the poor. And he started giving out these micro loans to people in Bangladesh at a 20% interest.
oh, please, 20%. Oh, I'm sorry. He gets a piece for. Okay, I'm sorry.
Robbery. Say it.
And it didn't stop there. By utilizing his links to the Western ruling elite, there is a Grameen Bank branch here in the US that mostly serves Black and Latino communities, and they give out loans for 15 to 18% interest. So really exploiting the fact that you are poor, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna make you even poor after we give you this loan.
Right.
Oh wow.
Dog is dying.
Sorry, I'm reading the.
Go ahead.
And I think the most sort of condemning thing about Muhammad Yunus is that he worked for the National Endowment for Democracy.
Oh boy.
And has Soros money. Yeah.
Soros.
Oh,
He's like a Frankenstein.
Saturday fake school kids.
Same thing.
Yeah, okay.
Muhammad Yunus.
If Philadelphia was a country, they're Muhammad Yunus
We'd probably be in jail.
for having to flee.
We have to flee to India. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
He's old.
Yeah,
He's 84.
Oh, please.
Another old mouth.
Allow Americans to invest money in this so they can get some money from those 20%.
Big Bang Ben.
So the National Endowment for Democracy is also one of these U.S. institutions that claims to promote democracy around the world, which is another way of saying that we host color revolutions.
So true.
And,
For a big buck.
yeah, so the Chinese Foreign Ministry recently released a report on the National Endowment for Democracy, where there's a comprehensive report about everything that the NED has done in different color revolutions around the world: Tunisia, Egypt, Ukraine in 2011, and the Chinese have caught on. The Chinese were almost the first people to say that, yeah, this is some bullshit. So I think the question then becomes like, why did the US think it was necessary to do this, right? And like I mentioned in the beginning, the country's location is extremely relevant. The country's location is extremely relevant because it is just south of China. It is bordering India on one side, and India that the US cannot really count on anymore. The US-India relationships have been straining, while India-China relations have been getting better for the last couple of months. They are trying to have talks to resolve border issues, build more relevant ties. And this is an existential threat, or as they perceive it, for the ruling elite. And according to Sheikh Hasina herself and other cabinet members, the primary objective of the US was to establish a US military base on St. Martin's Island, which is like just off the coast of Bangladesh. And what this would mean is a few different things. Having military presence in the south, in the Bay of Bengal, essentially in South Asia, would mean a couple of things. One is that now they don't have to ask India's permission or have their approval if they want to if they want to have naval attacks go from the Bay of Bengal to interfere with China and Myanmar's relationship. And the second thing is that China gets most of its oil through this strait called the Strait of Malacca. 90% of all of China's oil comes through the Strait of Malacca, and which it gets from Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf. And that is a significant choke point. And if there is an escalation of hostilities with China in the South China Sea, they could cut it off and have restricted their access to oil from the Persian Gulf and other Arab countries. The north of Bangladesh is very strategic for launching incursions into China, and also the US actions, very important to note that the US actions have been very telling, because in January, when the Bangladesh elections happened, they immediately said that these are unfair elections and they are not free, they're not fair. And immediately after Sheikh Hasina left and Mohammad Yunus was made the interim prime minister, an official statement by Anthony Blinken came out saying that we support this interim government. Very similar to what happened with Maduro very recently, but it failed there and it kind of succeeded here in Bangladesh. And you can also, there's been a lot of chatter about the US officials having regular meetings with the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which is the opposition party, and the de facto head, who's Tariq Rahman. And Yeah, so there's a lot of information.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get through a little bit at a time. So the US definitely wanted this. It made a lot of sense. And all of these things that I'm saying, like the US naval base, it wasn't recent, you know. Like Sheikh Hasina back in February had given a statement saying that if I had let a certain country build a US military base in Bangladesh, I would have won the election. They had assured me that I would have won my election.
Wow.
So she did not consent to this military base. She did not consent to join the Quad Alliance multiple times, and that made Sheikh Hasina and Bangladesh a very, very clear target. And there's also a question that what makes one think that this is a color revolution and not an actual revolutionary movement for democracy. There are a lot of signs. One thing being mass protests without any leadership, triggered by a very specific issue that I said, like a very specific issue that has been going on for a long time, and which the government does not think is national security, which is a national security issue. Active participation of the youth in particular, and then it spreads to other groups around Bangladesh. Use of technology, in particular these secure communication applications, as well as this encryption software and all of these things that could help them escape detection from the kind of technology that the government of that state has to use. And this one is very important. Generous and very unexplained donations of a lot of money from new bank accounts from recently established charities or NGOs. A lot of this money has been traced back to India, back to Bengal in particular, where because Bengal and Bangladesh are beside each other, a lot of people who did not support the Bangladeshi liberation of 1971 actually fled to Bengal, and then they lived a very cushy life there because they knew that they would be held accountable back in Bangladesh. So just like the US dollar acts as legal tender around the world, the Indian rupee can act as legal tender in Bangladesh. So it has been so we have seen like large amounts, like millions of dollars going into the bank accounts of these student protesters. And the other thing that I already mentioned is that very random news, one-sided random news about political violence against these protesters, which were meant to incite other groups and around the country. And if all of this is not clear, Muhammad Yunus himself back in 2015 said that he would support, he had the desire to support or even lead a benevolent dictatorship over the democratically elected government. And this was back in 2015. And it is very important, I feel, to understand that coups are not planned overnight, or in days. Significant funding has been steadily flowing into the country for months, and the opposition party, as well as the members of these student organizations, have all of their bank details when they were looked at. All of these were traced to these NGOs established, like Soros, essentially Soros money coming in from different sources to these bank accounts. And then you also have these secret meetings between US government officials and these student protesters, as well as the opposition party in the leading up to this. And the last thing, this is, of course, this is speculation and this is sort of from non-verifiable sources, that the judges of the Supreme Court who passed this order repealing the quota, they also have a significant nexus in the US. They have significant links to the US ruling elite. All of their kids are here and studying here. So, that was the spark, right? That was the spark that set off a movement that spread and led to the ousting of of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's daughter, a democratically elected leader of this country. And I guess all of this to say is, why does this matter? And I'll be very brief with this. I think it matters because an attack on Sheikh Mujibur Rahman or an attack on the leadership of a liberation movement anywhere is an attack on the country, its people, and its future. So the kind of disrespect that has been shown to the country's liberation leader, the reason why violence is free is because of this man, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And you see videos of people hitting his statue with their sandals. This is, in no uncertain terms, an attack by this country for its own geopolitical reasons. But it is an ideological attack on the entire concept of freedom and democracy, when a foreign power that has nothing to do in South Asia comes in and says, this is how it is. You either agree with all of what we are trying to say, or you replace, always the threat of this replacement. And I think in January or February, Christina sort of made a statement saying that the US can cause regime change in any nation that it wants. She came out and said this. And even though Sheikh Hasina's, I know a lot of people will say Sheikh Hasina's own son came out and said that all of these things that Sheikh Hasina is saying after she was ousted is false. Yeah, so.
Your son, now what's up with him? Okay.
Well, I
think he largely,
his son has been good in my opinion.
Yeah,
He's given good interviews.
Yeah, I think the only thing was about this interference of US, and I think his son had some confusing thing to say about whether it was US or China. But he has been pretty stable in terms of saying that, of course, there was a foreign hand in the meddling of the coup.
But he did come out and say that the statement that Sheikh Hasina made right after she left was false. But that doesn't make sense because it's not the first time that Sheikh Hasina has made a statement like this. She's been saying this for the last 6 months. And I don't really know how to end. But
I want to say a couple of things. I guess the question is what happens in the future. The fact that Sheikh Hasina was able to, and I think it's a misrepresentation to say that she fled, because she would have been killed if she didn't. She would have been lynched by that mob, and she had to be convinced to leave in a span of 45 minutes. And I think it's good that Modi and whoever, India, was able to give her. That's the least that could have been done. But the next question is, what is India going to do after this? Because in 71, the position was clear. There was an Indira Gandhi at the helm. And the question is whether the current Indian regime, whether Modi as a leader is able to rise to the occasion and recognize this as a threat, not just for Bangladesh, but for South Asia at large, like you've been saying. And I mean, the details are important because the details give you a sense of how entrenched, these tendencies are, and how students and universities can be used to destabilize a government within a span of what, a couple of weeks. And if it could happen in Bangladesh, there is every reason to be worried that it could happen in India.
Absolutely.
And I guess it goes back to this question of what we were saying before of the ideological struggle, and it becomes so important, especially the kind of work that our colleagues Nandita and Raju are trying to do in India. How are India and China going to resolve their differences to build a strong foundation for peace in South Asia? How is India going to respond to threats on Bangladesh like this? But one thing that was hopeful, and Nanta, I can't remember whether it was Raju or Nanta, one of them told me that in the Independence Day speech that Modi made, which is on 15th August, which, by the way, is the day that Mujibur Rahman was assassinated. And Sheikh Hasina had sent out a call for people in Bangladesh to converge, at the place, memorializing that assassination and memorializing Mujibur, saying, come and pray, come and pray, come and gather. And the goons of these so-called, students, whatever, they came and beat up people who had gathered there. And they cancelled the day as a national holiday and a day of mourning. And Muhammad Yunus had a huge role to play in that. So it's a mob government. There's no law and order. It was not a student protest, because why do students have weapons? And, yes, the state used force and people died, but 14 police officers were beaten to death. I mean, can you imagine something like that happening in a United States city, and what the response to that would have been? Would the same people who are lauding these students would then have said, oh, of course, great, you beat 14 police officers to death, But all of that to say, okay, going back to what Modi said in his speech, he basically said that this is a very crucial moment in the history of our country, and there are external and internal pressures. But for all people, I would like to say to the external forces that are looking to India and looking at where India is going, I'd like to say that they should remember that India's development is not a threat to anybody. And the reason why I bring this up is because this is probably the first time in my knowledge Modi has actually directly engaged with the question that India, there are foreign powers looking at India and looking at what position India is going to take. And I think he's trying to make a case, or he's trying to make it clear that India will follow its path of development on its own terms. And he's saying that there is no reason to basically start from a place that this is going to be in anybody's ulterior, it's not going to be a threat to anybody. And maybe that's not the strongest.
What is not going to be a threat then? You mean
He's saying that letting India go the path, India will go the path it wants to go. And everybody concerned should pay attention to the fact that this should not be a threat to anybody, is what he's saying.
India's development.
Yeah. And I mean, this may not be the strongest, statement or strongest stand to make, but I think it's in the positive direction. And in general, all of the people, because there's a lot of misinformation about Bangladesh, because I think student movements in general are very difficult to place. I don't think the student encampments here were really understood the way it should have been understood. And I don't think the Bangladesh thing, definitely, because there are a lot of people who I was very surprised turn out to think that this was a great positive. And I agree with what Shantanu said, is anybody who thinks that desecrating Mujibur's memory, desecrating the liberation war of 71, and by the way, the genocide that, that the Pakistan and the and the CIA together killing up to 1.5 million, I even forget what the projection is, Bangladeshi people. You forget all of that. You forget the blood and sweat and, just the human devastation that was the cost of Bangladesh liberation. And you desecrate that because of something about quotas, something about corruption.
No, the issue does not that issue does not justify all of this.
No.
A coup d'etat over quotas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like I've been in a constant state of rage since this started,
Yes.
because the audacity to do that, the audacity to humiliate. And it's like basically taking down Mujibur's statue in Bangladesh is like taking down a statue of Gandhi in India.
Yeah, that's what I'm
It
thinking.
is,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
what I'm
he's
thinking.
so this
And
protest,
then to humiliate Sheikh Shishina,
yeah.
to go in where, see, why would they desecrate her saris, her personal?
Yeah, because they're the ugliest young people that I've ever seen in my life, you know. They're ugly because they've,
Yes.
you know, because they've basically, yeah, they've compromised. They've sold out, you know, to some imagined idea of what freedom and democracy should look like, when all your life you've benefited from the real freedom and democracy that these people paid with their
Yes.
blood for. Yeah. Anyway, it was really, really ugly to see those photographs. Really ugly.
Can I ask a question, please, for both of you? I know the fact that Sheikh Shishina is
Hasina.
in Delhi, which is the best place perhaps to be, because if there is a movement to overturn this coup d'etat, then she's not far away, you know?
And there, I think,
And India, I would just say, if you all think this is, India cannot be a sideline observer. of this.
Yeah.
Just like under Indira,
yeah.
under Indira Gandhi, India was decisive for the freedom of Bangladesh. So India, I don't know how you feel. And the third question is, I guess, has the Congress said anything?
As far as I know, I haven't heard something that was, to me, seemed like a satisfactory. Like I haven't heard something from, like, you know, leadership in India that has sounded like a satisfactory response to what is going on, or a direct, or a direct commitment that, you know what, no matter what happens, we are going to. It hasn't happened yet.
No.
And it's, I think this is the big question about Indian leadership right now, is because it's not
That's right.
what we would have.
Because see, and this is what we were fearing all the time. You're trying to play both ends against the middle. You with the U.S. and forget you with Russia. It's just, and then when it comes to a crisis, can the Indian government act decisively, which it must. Which it must. And what is the population of Bangladesh?
Not sure if I know.
100, over 100.
Yeah, it's one of the. Yeah, I think it's the fourth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's. Okay, I'm
No, I was just going to say that from what I can see, that the Congress has basically made extremely general, overarching like comments about what has happened in Bangladesh, with very passing mention about minorities, because Bangladesh is a Muslim majority state, and their Hindus are in the minority. So at one point it became, so like I said, it started with quotas and then it blew up everywhere, and then you had violence against minorities.
No. Can I clarify something?
Yeah.
The violence against Hindus makes sense because the forces that were behind these protests are Islamist forces, the same ones that were
ISIS.
tied to the US-Pakistan axis in
and
71.
also the U.S. The model is Syria.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
You know, and God, see, this is a huge crisis. This is bigger than Myanmar and anywhere. Because and India must act.
Yes.
They can't allow this to stand. You know what I'm saying? India, and of course, it's always when you do this kind of thing, to exacerbate whatever religious, ethnic differences they are. That's why y'all are right. If they could do it in Bangladesh, that's a trial run for India. And Modi, you know what I'm saying? You get out of hand, we
Yeah.
could take you out.
Yeah.
This is, that's what you
What I think these petitions, these petitions separating these continents, separating
Yes,
ethnic and,
absolutely.
the whole world, this continent world, with all of those, they were unified different times.
It does go back to the partition of South Asia, of India.
That's the Western construction. Putting those false petitions, separating people,
Right.
who's the shared grain together.
Right. Well, I mean, just to really emphasize on the point that Shantanu was also trying to make about Muhammad Yunus.
Yes.
I mean, it reminds me of the political objective of the science conference that we did, just how the academic can become such an important weapon in the hands of the Western ruling elite.
Yeah.
Because he basically Fulbright scholarship, Vanderbilt PhD in economics, presidential medal, whatever, all these accolades, Soros money, National Endowment for Democracy, whatever. And then, there's been so much criticism of Sheikh Hasina because in the last few months, I guess for a couple of years, she and her government had like all these allegations and charges that they had leveled against Muhammad Yunus for bleeding the Bangladeshi poor dry through, this sort of Grameen Bank scam, which like Shantanu was explaining, these high rates of interest and also micro loans, meaning that, oh, you feel like, oh, of course, like small amounts, so this is more doable, but then the net result is the impoverishment. But the entire world, and especially from the US academics, there was so much defense of Yunus as, oh, this is political persecution. He's a scholar and a researcher. This is just because Hasina is jealous that a cult of personality might form around him. But basically, this is what the state of Bangladesh was against Yunus in the first place because of. And unfortunately, it looks like temporarily he might have triumphed, or the forces that created him might have triumphed. But given the lawlessness in Bangladesh right now, like the Supreme Court, so many of the chief justices basically resigned. The interim government they were forced to resign. The interim government literally has those same student leaders. A couple of them are cabinet ministers now. What is this? This is mob rule, and the persecution of, the Hindus, or political persecution of Awami League members, like Hasina's party. I mean, let's see where it goes. Let's see if this interim government can actually restore, any semblance of stability. Because other than that, there might be a counter protest to this whole
But where's
thing.
the military on this?
Well, the military were the first to respond and say that, we are basically going to form an interim government. And the military basically, I remember that when Hasina had to leave, it was the army chief or somebody who basically said, oh, no, we cannot like conscientiously shoot on or repress these students, so the mob will come and whatever. Now I don't know if that is such a great moral declaration, but then I also go back to this thing of how many police officers they actually killed, the mob, like suppose it's students beating to death so many police officers. The police went on strike. They were like, it doesn't look like we can do our job, so we're going on strike. So it's utter chaos. And I'm not so convinced, what is the future?
Yes.
So Baldwin in this I'm gonna call it the woolen garden, like something woolen was put together in the garden. This because Mary Baldwin is speaking about political and that. So you can see it's a kernel of something about Baldwin. It's not just you don't know him as a thing, you don't know him as you don't know him as a but he had some of the and he had some of the ribbon, like the type of ribbon. He had some of those things that nobody like it confirms what we might not mention. And then it confirms what I have meditated with. Someone would want to exclude him from all of these different positions, not knowing his qualified as a human being, and not to be outwitted, like he didn't have any wisdom, he had with the wisdom. And him being missing all of these conversations, they don't understand what petition would be. This petition would be for me personally, but I Baldwin would see this line separate the humanity, this humanity that I'm Tony, like we all are speaking from. Baldwin had all that into which come into George, you know, and Henry James.
Oh, let me check.
Henry James, and how he had wore that fabric, fire from different types of things. Because the best flip, he's still not just dealing with being murdered. He's dealing with the world here, the world mirror, like a world mirror. And no one had came forward to you. Anytime a lot of avoided, they both were the principal order. That was incredible. You know, for both of them, an argument of Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, CIA, and all these other instrumental people utilizing them, that all of us come from different ways. But why are we sitting at the table? Why are we sitting at the table?
Can I just say one thing, adding on what you go on podcasts and they're all talking about the end of the American empire and its weekend, but it's not that weekend.
Right. If
The
you
fact
can,
that they could
if you could literally take a country's liberation struggle and turn it upside down.
That's right.
That's what has happened.
And they are stronger than we want to. But see, I could be wrong. See, I think the Modi government playing this opportunity. Why are you partisan shit against China? That's number one. And what can, that's why they're going to have to get there. And we were thinking, and I think Modi had said this, had he not suffered what was a humiliation in the last election, there was thought that he was going to be firmer in foreign policy,
Well, I found, the Indian punchline guy, Bhadrakumar.
Yes,
He recently wrote an article which I thought was interesting.
Who was this now?
The Indian punchline, M.K. Bhadrakumar.
Oh, yeah, yes.
He recently wrote an article about how there is reason to have hopes for the India-China relationships getting better
That's very
because of statements that Modi and Jaishankar have made in recent times. And I guess all of these questions become questions of let's see what happens. But I think there is reason to feel positively, except Modi is not Indira Gandhi, of course, and the BJP government's, insistence on in some ways trying to lessen that period of, or just it has come in the way. If you're really leaned into it, you probably would know what your role was supposed to be in this moment.
the
But-
BJP being against the Congress and the Congress being the foundation of being formulated as the foundation of the freedom struggle, it's a difficult thing to understand, but this is what is happening because currently their main political opponent is the Congress, and the Congress has been at the helm of India's independence movement. So, in rejecting or attacking the Congress now, that's fine. They're your political opponents, but to actually also reject on the same in the same line the Indian independence struggle and its leaders and the ideology that comes with it, I don't think that's going to be beneficial. For
And
them.
no Indian patriot can look at Bangladesh knowing India's role in the freedom of Bangladesh. How can you look at that and say, well, you have to be outraged. I can't see. I mean, both the Congress and and Modi's party. At least
Yeah, and
that's
it's
what I'm
not.
thinking.
Yeah, and it's not a question of the Hindu minorities in
No,
Bangladesh
no,
that should be the end.
No.
It's a question. Yeah,
Yeah.
agreeing with what you're saying.
And that is what the Congress and the BJP both have chosen to focus on, which is the Hindu minority.
Oh, God. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like we're going to end free school on
On
a
a-
low note.
We have some nice comments.
Oh, yeah. That's so sad.
Is it okay if I read comments and then we can end? So, VA from NY says, thank you for this presentation on Bangladesh. And then another commenter, I still don't know how to pronounce their username, but just says that a coup is typically carried out by soldiers and that this was likely a color revolution. So I think, yeah, like technically, I think that makes sense. And then earlier from the conversation, people were just saying good morning. Someone named JDM Phil. So someone says, good morning, Phil. Yeah, Phil Logan says Phil here. It's been a long time. Nice to see the free school still going strong. Todd Doherty says good morning, free school. So does Parks. Virginia Cott says good morning from California. Gannon said, what's up, free school? Listening from Tennessee today. Yeah. And then when Doc was talking about the autobiography of the free school, Todd said, this is quite the precious free school session. Thank you, Doc. And then they were talking about the different speeches and articles that we were referencing. And so I think someone was asking for the Du Bois essay on Jefferson Davis, and then Todd provided the title. Todd also asked about the King speech that talks about the Good Samaritan, and it's called On Being a Good Neighbor. And I think it's available online.
And so is the Du Bois.
Du Bois is also, yeah. Todd was digging the bread reference by Shambarto. Someone whose username is President Jesus asks, do you think Baldwin was promoted by the ruling class and why? I apologize in advance if this question has been addressed. And I think we did address it in part, but it's not that Baldwin was promoted. It's that in some ways you could see it as like the ruling class recognizes that Baldwin is a pivotal figure in American history. And so it's almost like people said, there was a political, ideological, and character assassination of Baldwin through the promotion of a false version of Baldwin, which basically which says more about the agenda of the ruling class than it says about Baldwin. I think that's kind of how we've been approaching the ideological battle over Baldwin. And yeah, I think that those are most of the comments. And I guess the last thing I want to say in response to the Bangladesh stuff is that part of it too is we've been talking about this because one of the essays that we're working on for Avant-Garde's next issue is an assessment of the student movement in the US, which Nuri's working on. But part of it is that even amongst the students, as well as a lot of leftists who are trying to kind of capitalize on the student movement in America, there's this obsession with whether you call it political tactics or you call it political form, which basically becomes much more important than the actual political substance of what the protests are about. And a lot of it's on like, oh, like what is the strat, like what are you doing like in terms of the encampment and like the mechanics of it and all that. And I think part of what this shows is that I do think a lot of, at least from what I've seen, a lot of like young people, without knowing that much about the situation in Bangladesh, in America, like they'll look at Bangladesh. This is a positive example of a student movement that has been able to actually seize power and actually make change. And I think that this also shows that I think the student movement in America has to mature politically and ideologically. And in some ways, it's that the basically, yeah, the philosophical or the political substance matters a lot. Like the ideological substance of a student movement matters a lot, and not all student movements are the same. And I think part of that too is, yeah, I guess the question that we've been talking about overall.
The same thing in Tiananmen Square.
Yeah, right,
It's a similar pattern.
right,
And you're right, they always, maybe not always, but generally use student movements.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Because student movements have played such a huge role in the liberation movement.
Yes,
And then they, then,
yeah,
But yeah, there's something really like disgusting about it, because what you're doing is you're really taking advantage of the well accepted
Yeah.
belief that, oh, young people, they're idealistic, they would want to take something that is such a positive thing, that is, the mark of the youth, to,
Right.
Want to do some be good intention, to take that and to twist it and to contort it into this
Right.
ugly
But
form.
that's the role of
Yeah.
the National Endowment for Democracy,
So
the
bad.
CIA, all kinds
Yeah.
of other.
because also it's a movement, or I guess you could say a movement against an imperialist state, which is a movement that is forming in the United States, is very different. It is basically contradictory to a movement that is opposed to a state that is working to carry out the mandate of the freedom movement. And I think that distinction has to be made, because a lot of young people would just be like, oh, it's against the state.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. And yeah. But, oh yeah, Jahan ended by saying Bangladesh shows the morbid symptoms of the interregnum that we are living through. And it's interesting to compare Baldwin with other theorists, and he looks forward to continuing this ideological struggle at our DNC roundtable later this week.
That has to factor in.
Okay, thank you everyone for, this is a longer free school, but it was a very enriching free school. And thank you to everyone who is watching and commenting. And we'll be here next week after the DNC, after our roundtable. And we highly encourage anyone who's been tuning into the free school to also tune into our 2 days of roundtable discussions this Wednesday and Thursday on the 21st and 22nd. But yeah, otherwise, goodbye.